Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home. Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome to the Free Birth Society podcast. This is a radical space for women who are ready to celebrate their autonomous choices in birth, motherhood, and beyond. Together, we'll learn about wild birth through personal narrative, we'll explore the politics of birth, and we'll analyze everything that relates to our lives as women from a feminist perspective. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Hello, my friend.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. I'm excited to have you here, but I want to say right off the bat, you are not getting off the hook telling us your epic free birth tale, but we will save that for a different episode.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Jen and I go way back. I think we connected in 2017, 2018.
Yeah, 18.
Yeah, at the start of all this FBS stuff, and have been friends ever since. And Jen is also my personal naturopath, my wise woman, who I go to with any of mine and my family's ailments or healing symptoms that I don't know what to do with. So she's my, is it homeopathist?
I guess my title's a naturopathic doctor, but I do
Yeah.
specialize in homeopathy.
Yeah. So Jen has taught me a lot and also helps me figure out the stuff I don't want to actually learn, which is so great and helpful. So you have played such an important role in my life, and I know I've played an important role in your life, and we're just both very important to each other. So I love having women like that on the show, and that I get to kind of share you and a little taste of your wisdom, with the world.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. It's an honor because you have impacted me, especially in the birthing world, and just in awe of everything you've created and what you're doing for humanity with waking women up to birthing outside the system. It's huge, and I'm gonna actually talk about that today because it's part of what is going on with children. But I'm super excited to be here. So like Emily said, I'm a naturopathic doctor by training. I specialize in pediatrics and moms, family medicine. I really operate outside of the allopathic medical system, even though I have a licensure. And that's mainly due because I went to Florida where naturopathic doctors are not allowed to be licensed. And so that basically forced me into really honing in on how to cure people without any help of allopathic medicine. Because naturopathic doctors, just like midwifery these days, have been infiltrated. And the more that we try to keep up with the Joneses and have prescription rights and have fancy tools like IVs, naturopathic medicine is being lost. And so when I went to Florida and practiced there, it really forced me to, if I wanted to survive and pay my bills and get recurring business, I had to cure people and get referrals. And I had to know how to do that with herbs and homeopathy and all the basic, like, foundational nature cure information. And so free birth aligns perfectly with that because so many of the women that I met, I've been to your festival. I've like some of my best friends have come out of there. We're just on a different plane of consciousness. We operate out of a different paradigm. And that's how I live my life too, out of that paradigm, that old paradigm, which we're going to get into. That's a lot about what this discussion is about. So I'm really passionate about working with children, especially unvaccinated children, families and moms that are aware of what's going on in this system and they want to get out, and they either have fully removed themselves already or they're trying to get out and they need help getting out, right? They need help through you to, like really educate them on the birthing practices. And if something comes up medically, they need to know how to treat their children or who they can trust and go to when something comes up so they don't have to rely on allopathic medicine.
So today we're going to be mostly focusing on tackling this question: why are children so sick? What the fuck has happened to humanity Why are our kids so sick? Well, not our kids. Actually, we were just talking before we're recording that our kids are like never sick. But why are meaning the world's, our countries? And then also what to do about it, right? Would you say that's kind of where we're heading?
That's a part. So the first half, I do want to talk about, like, just give you guys statistics. And I want to go back in history and pick out some key events that really, really impacted children and where we are today of why our kids are so sick. And then I want to spin that and talk about, okay, now that we know what has happened and now we got to get out of that system and we have to know what to do to actually to be healthy and to thrive, because in this new paradigm, you don't have to be sick. You don't have to be depressed. We can thrive as a species. And so educating yourself to know what happened and why our country is like it is and why our health statistics are like they are, it's so good to know the history so that you can say, oh my God, this is why I intuitively made this decision, or this is why we're doing this, because there's a big chance that you're the black sheep of the family and that you have a lot of family that are still operating in the old paradigm of allopathic medicine. And sometimes it feels alienating, right? Like you are like, am I making the best decision? Because is birthing outside of the hospital safe? And so, but when you have these concrete facts, it gives you confidence to be like, wow, this is why I do what I do. This is why I chose the lifestyle that I am doing. And it just gives you more confidence as a mother and as a human. So let's get started.
Let's do it.
Okay, so the first thing that I like to do is just give some statistics, because we all know that something's off. Like if you look around a normal park with there's lots of kids, it's not the park that we grew up in 1980, right?
It is not the park we grew up in.
The obesity rate, the amount of illness you just see from looking, the autism, the Asperger's, the just like slowing down of like joints and just like how kids are moving.
Dude, full on deformity.
Yes. They can't run.
Physical deformities are commonplace.
Yes. And this is the norm now. And that's frightening. A healthy, normal, non-obese kid is rare these days. And it's frightening. And it's frightening not only just as a species itself, but like our kids are going to get married one day. Our kids are going to, like, future generations. Like, we have to change what's going on with our health. And the thing with that aggravates me with kids is that they're helpless. They can't do anything. This is all on the mothers and on the fathers and their decisions they're making for their children of why they're so sick. And so let's go through some statistics. And, this is pretty hot right now, just in the global, like we are talking about health more and more. And so I have gotten some of these statistics, just they're fresh, some of them, but it's pretty eye-dropping. So, the CDC says that America has the highest chronic disease on earth. Okay. So we're really focusing on America because we are the sickest nation in the world. We're ranked 79th in overall health in the world, right next to Mongolia. Like, we have the most money, we have so much money, we have so much access to innovative things in medicine, and we're that sick as a nation. It doesn't make sense. 2/3 of Americans are suffering from chronic disease. Okay, 50 years ago, that number was 1%. Now it's 66% of Americans are suffering with chronic disease. Like, chronic disease meaning autoimmune conditions, thyroid conditions, gut conditions, cancer, all this stuff. Like, this isn't just like we have a common cold. This is like serious chronic disease. And this number is even more frightening. 74% of Americans are obese and 50% of children are obese. So 100 years ago, obesity wasn't known. In Japan today, the obesity rate's 3%. Here in kids, it's 50% in kids. So you look out when you're in like a mall or somewhere more standard and you see, why are kids so obese? What is going on? This is not natural. Half of Americans have prediabetes or diabetes too. And what's even scarier is 1 out of 3 kids are now diabetic or pre-diabetic. So diabetes is a nasty disease. It leads to severe complications like kidney disease, eye disease, fatty liver, everything. And it's just something that you don't want to mess with. And essentially, diabetes is too much glucose in the system, too much sugar, i.e. your diet. It's completely reversible if you work on your diet. And so, seeing 1 out of 3 kids now are pre-diabetic or diabetic, we're talking about heavy medications to regulate that if you don't do it naturally and in a different, in an alternative medicine type of base. Alzheimer's, this is frightening. So Alzheimer's is now officially classified as type 3 diabetes. So it's basically diabetes of the brain.
That's
So it's
interesting. I
sugar
didn't know
in the
that.
brain. And what's even scarier is I've actually seen patients now in their 40s that are having Alzheimer's. So we're seeing it happening younger and younger in the population. Alzheimer's used to be for old elderly people, right? And so to see 40-year-olds get this is pretty frightening. I mean, neurological disease is up. We know like ADD, ADHD, Tourette syndrome, autism, Asperger's, all of that is up. So in the year 2000, which we were in high school about that time, and the autism rate in America was 1 out of 1,500. Now the autism rate is 1 in 36 kids. That is insane. And in states like California, it's 1 in 22. And so if you go like, what is happening? Like what has changed so much? And I'm going to get into this. And we know that autism, we know something like it's a really actually great experiment, because in California, where they implemented laws like mandatory vaccinations, now we're seeing autism rates go through the roof. And so we have to just kind of address, like, we have to call out what is causing this. And vaccines do contribute a lot to autism. This is a weird.
Why would injecting toxic pharmaceuticals into a child impact their neurological function? Isn't that hate speech?
Yeah. Yeah, it just, I mean, basically are you serious? Okay, it bypasses the blood.
No.
Right? Okay.
But like, it's a fucking crazy thing that people defend.
It's bizarre.
It's bizarre.
If you look at it and you
It's a
say,
cult.
it's a cult. And if you just say, what has changed in this time? Yes, processed food, but the vaccination rate is through the roof, and mandatory vaccines, especially in California, it's causing more and more autism. And it's obvious to everyone who's not part of the agenda, right?
Yeah.
Our kids are so sick that 77% of our boys cannot qualify for the military. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want my son in the military, right? But that's like saying that at an age when you are in your prime, like when kids are 18, that's the prime of like their athletic ability. And that's when like men are just like the healthiest, the strongest, the most agile. 77% of boys can't qualify to join the military now.
Because
they're so sick. They disqualify because of chronic disease or some type of illness or something. So that's like, yeah, this is like, it's just, and it is happening worldwide, but the incidences in America is much, much stronger than.
Which that is an interesting point, because that seems very counter to, like, I get the evil agendas to keep everyone sick. Except, don't you want to also train like an elite group for the military? Like, that seems contradictory to other agendas of our country, which is to
a lot of these agendas are contradictory. You're just like, they don't make sense, like in reality, don't we want a country that thrives and is healthy? And it's like, what is going on? Who's controlling these strings?
No, I think it makes sense that the evil overlords would prefer a sick people. That makes the most sense.
They're slaves, essentially.
Yeah, I mean,
when you're sick, you don't you don't fluff the feathers. You just like sit on your couch.
You don't think for yourself.
Yeah, you don't think for yourself. You just follow the status quo, and you want people to be sick. And ultimately, also, it's a financial thing, right? Like when you get children addicted to pharmaceuticals from a young age, they're in business the rest of your life. Like they are going to be contributing to your fund. So you want people sick. But you would think that people that are leaders of a country, like when you have a leadership position, you want the people under you to be like the best they can be. That makes you a good leader. So in a logical way, it doesn't make sense that they want us so sick unless you have like crooked people at the top running the show, which it's obvious that that's what's going on. Okay, this is another scary statistic. 18% of teens have fatty liver. So that's 1 out of 5 kids have fatty liver, which is a direct response to diabetes, food. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease used to only happen to old people, and it was basically caused from obesity and high blood sugars and stuff like that, a sedentary lifestyle. But now 1 in 5 kids have fatty liver. So all of these kids eventually are going to have, if they don't get together, are going to have to go on the liver transplant list, which is already like suffering majorly anyway. So to have kids with fatty liver is just, we just never saw this that long ago. In medical school, I learned that fatty liver disease was for like old people and alcoholics. Like that was like fatty liver. But to see it in kids, it's very bizarre. Cancer rate in kids is up 79%. 79%. If you look at the chart, I don't have it here, I can show you, but if you look at the chart, you'll see like cancer rates in kids, and all of a sudden, boing, and it just shoots up. Okay.
And what happened at that time that shot it up?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. And it's this time zone between the last basically 100 years of when our kids have really been sick. But really the last 20, 30 years, is really a big factor in that. And that's when the main culprits of this are the vaccines and the food industry.
And surgical birth, ultrasound technology.
All of this. Yep.
Food, yeah. It's going to be food, injections, and the way they're born.
Yeah, and it all started, and I'm so excited to talk about this day because I'm going to go through the history and say this is the point, but it all started with the Flexner Report of 1910, which changed the face of medicine. To me, it's the biggest hoax in medicine in the history of medicine. It changed the face of medicine globally forever, and hopefully we can unwind it. We'll see what happens in the future. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. 15% of teens are on Adderall. 1 in 4 women are on antidepressants. 1 in 4 women. Think about being in a room of women, and 1 in 4 on antidepressants, unless you're maybe part of the free birth and you're in a free birth circle, and then maybe that statistic would probably most likely be lower. But 500,000 children are on SSRIs. These are drugs that like essentially like shut your emotions down, right? You're like a walking zombie. You can't like empathetically relate to people when you're on these drugs. And there's something going on with the government. We know that 70% of the FDA funding comes from big pharma. So the regulatory agencies that are supposed to be in charge of our health and look out for our health, they're getting money from pharma. So they're not going to say, oh, this is your fault, right? That they're getting all their money from that. So it's really a problem within the government, the regulatory boards, the people that are in charge of big pharma and the research. It's all a revolving door.
And the doctors and pediatricians are incentivized by these companies.
They're incentivized. So I would call them more like slave-like people because they don't really they're just like being trained and indoctrinated to not think out of the box, so that when they're told like, hey, you're like, so let's say I have an allopathic allopathic practice. I get a certain amount of money per kid that is vaccinated. And so that if I want to get that bonus and there's like 1 or 2 families that are kind of questioning vaccines, I'm just going to kick them out of my office because that's going to cost me like a couple $100,000.
But they directly benefit from pushing drugs.
Directly benefit. There is incentives, and you can look at like different insurance incentives out of a certain percentage of, and they did this with the COVID vaccine too. If a certain percentage of your population is vaccinated, then you get a stipend of money. Mm-hmm. And so it's just all about the money.
There are deep, powerful secrets to your own sacred experience of womanhood that no one in your life knew to tell you. The time has come to fully awaken the wise woman within you and to claim your place on the ancient path of supporting holistic women's health. You're well aware of the devastating reality that is modern fertility, modern menstruation, industrial birth, the way our society treats menopause, and really all of the rites of passage for women from start to finish. We are countless generations deep now with girls initiated into womanhood with deep, lifelong, toxic shame. Grown women have no idea how to tell when they're fertile, how to prevent pregnancy, how to address menstrual challenges without pharmaceuticals. There's no room for how to harness the wisdom and gifts of our cycle's phases. Women are afraid of their own bodies, and they teach this to their daughters, and their daughters teach it to their daughters. This just isn't good enough, not for me, not for you, and certainly not for our daughters. And here we are, together in this time, wanting to do better, wanting to be better, to break the shame cycle, and to leave our lineage injected with power, wisdom, strength, and self-love. Join us for the next round of the Blood Mystery School. Our highly coveted program is channeled and run by two long-standing sisters of mine, women who are core leaders within Matriarch Rising Festival and Free Birth Society. Nancy Lucina is a shamanic facilitator and medicine woman. Kristen Hauser is a woman's holistic health expert. Together, they take you on a potent 8-week journey where you walk the medicine wheel of your own menstrual cycle's archetypes so that you can learn to guide the women of your community through cycle healing of all iterations. You will address the spiritual, energetic, hormonal, and biological aspects of every phase of the female cycle so that you are fully equipped to become the radical, sovereign cycle coach that your community really needs. The Blood Mystery School will pave the way for your career in cycle and fertility coaching, holistic women's health, and ceremony facilitation. This knowledge is foundational to any work in birth or women's health at large. We only run the Blood Mystery School once a year, so make sure you're on the wait list. The link is below. It is time that you walk with the knowledge all the women, and I do mean all, around you need to know. Let's be the ones that steer our bloodlines toward embodiment once and for all.
And so what the Flexner Report was, it was a report done in 1910. It was sponsored by the Carnegie Foundation by John Rockefeller. And basically he owns like big petro, big oil, and he saw that there was a lot of money in chemical medicine. And so he got his lawyer to basically write, which was Abraham Flexner, who got to write the Flexner Report, which is intent, is what they say, was to standardize and improve medical education through modern science principles. Okay. So that's what they say. But what happened is in that time, when John Rockefeller realized how much money was involved in this, allopathic medicine was the least favored medicine on the planet. Nobody liked them, right? Herbalists, eclectic doctors, homeopathic doctors, nature cure doctors. These were all the most famous doctors of our time. And this is what most of the people chose for their medicine. So what they basically did is they did a massive smear campaign. And they said that they went through all the medical education, and they said that anyone that basically that follows the Flexner guidance on medical education is going to be brought to the top. And this is going to be like the status quo of allopathic medicine. And they shut down all of the other alternative medicine schools. And they shut them down by not funding them. And when they did that, it brought allopathic medicine to basically to a science-based system, and it brought that basically allopathic medicine became the standard of care. So you came in, what you're going to get is surgery, drugs, or radiation. That was like the standard of care. And not only did it do that, it culturally shifted us too. Like, do you remember your grandparents or your mom, like their reliance on the allopathic system was like, it's kind of nauseating. They like kind of worship doctors, right? It was like instilled in them that if you got sick, you go and get on this drug. So they wiped out all the information of natural medicine. And there are people that kept that candle lit, you know, the herbalists.
I would go even further to say that our codependence on the medical system goes beyond symptomology. It's also, interwoven into the fabric of our society that you go when you're fine, right? Think well woman visit, well baby visit, annual, exams. Like you're just going to go, hey doc, want to find something wrong with me? Exactly. That is extra cuckoo.
Yeah, well, because when the Flexner Report came in, that's what happened is they prioritized hospital-based medicine and specialists. And so now you go and see a specialist for everything. And now you just go for checkups because, you got to make sure you're okay. And I'm like, look, if you're going to
only this like random pervert could possibly know that about me.
Right. And it's really detrimental. I mean, I've seen people, they get all these scans and they're looking for something. And it's like, look, if you keep looking for something, you're going to find something, how many cancers are false positive diagnoses, And
I'm also thinking though, just of the, like the factory farming assembly line element that shifts. And I think about, you're the closest thing, not closest thing. You are the health guidance that I seek, when I don't know what to do. And you and I have an intimate relationship. We've known each other for years. We know about each other's marriages and mothering and values. And when I have, symptoms or my children do, you know us. So
Yes.
there's an whole, perspective to that is now gone within what you're describing and what everyone obviously knows of the relationship in medical care. It's
Right.
strangers, it's completely reductive, it's so narrow, and not just narrow to the body, but to the entire person, which obviously so much is contributing to whatever acute symptom is getting presented, you know?
Right. Right. Totally. Totally. When I take a patient on, it's a very intimate relationship, and it makes sense too, right? Like, you don't get sick because, and we were just talking about this, like something came in from the outside and got you sick. You got sick because something was wrong already, that your susceptibility was so low that now you're manifesting symptoms. And so when I go to say, well, what's going on with you? If I only get 5 minutes with you, I'm not going to have any idea of what to do. And that's why
Right.
allopathic medicine is so easy, because they follow an algorithm. They just prescribe, like, oh, you just have a cough, that's it. Like, antibiotics.
Antibiotics.
My husband and I, who's also a naturopathic doctor, joke around like how easy it is to be an allopathic doctor. Literally, they don't critically think. They follow an algorithm and they just give the same prescriptions over and over.
Mhm.
And they don't have to follow up and make sure that patient's better, right? Like, my whole job depends on someone getting better. I only get paid if I get people better. Like, that's like that. And that makes sense to me, right? You're coming to get you better. But what other system, what other career do you not have to like have
Be
any,
accountable.
yeah, be accountable for anything
Mhm.
that you do? It's really bizarre. Um, and so, just to give you an idea of how much money John Rockefeller put into the Flexner Report, in the 1920s, it was $76 million, which equivalent today is $1.5 trillion that put into this mass marketing smear campaign. You can do a lot with $1.5 trillion today. We can shut down anything we want with $1.5 trillion today. And so essentially that's what happened. And it laid the groundwork for everything else that was going to happen after that. And so, and also too, like, it didn't just influence America. Like, this is a global thing now. Like, this pharmaceutical regime now is a global issue, and it's something that each country is going to have to take back. I don't know if that's possible. We'll see if it's possible, hopefully sometime in our lifetime, but we need to have a cultural shift where we don't run to pharmaceuticals, into that allopathic mindset when something comes up.
Well,
I think
also, like, it clearly doesn't work. Like,
it doesn't
it's
work.
it's I'd say, like, even bigger than that, it's just interrupting the um the herd, asleep consciousness. That's all. I mean, it's a big task, but that's all that needs to happen, because as soon as someone starts to critically think and like zoom out and see the whole thing, it is a logical next step to disengage from pharmaceuticals alone, much less like everything else. But really, if we were just to hone in on pharmaceuticals, like, it's just logical.
Yeah. It just takes a little critical thinking to be like, this isn't going to really work. Or you even maybe try it and it doesn't work, and you get all these side effects. It's like obvious that you need to start looking for something else. And it's kind of mind blowing that so many people don't. They just stay on the same narrow minded pathway, and they just keep going to the doctor, like, and they approach each appointment like as if something's going to change,
It's sad.
and you don't. It doesn't change. You go in there for 5 minutes. They say, how are you doing? They don't listen. They keep you on the same drugs. And it's like nothing's changing, yet you're still participating in this system.
Or they'll
So,
put you on slightly different drugs.
yeah, we'll put you on
You
slightly
know,
different drugs, change it here and there, but they're keeping you in the system. So it
of
really
course.
does take like a really open-minded person, or a critical thinker, to actually say, I'm going to opt out of this system, and then to opt out of it and convince your husband, if you guys aren't, and to convince your family, which you don't have to convince them, you can just do it. But that, a lot of people have an issue with just saying, I don't care what my family does, this is what I'm doing. Your personality is not like that, my personality is not like that, but a lot of people do. They care, and so it's really interesting when you think
Well,
of
they care because they don't have a sense of self,
right,
because they're in codependent dynamics and they're not in a healthy, functional, secure place in their lives. It's not that I don't care, it's that I'm in relationships with my family members where they respect me
right.
to make my
That's
own
a very good point.
decisions,
Yes,
so like if my mother like disapproved of me not taking my daughter to the pediatrician, we would have like a real issue,
right,
because that's a matter of respect as far
right.
as I'm concerned, and my mom knows that and I know that. And so we have conversations rooted in good faith and curiosity because my mom is all about the allopathic model. She was a nurse practitioner. She loves the doctor. She loves pharmaceuticals. And honestly, like that's fine because that's her
Right.
life to live. But yeah, I think I think it's important to name why people care so much,
Yeah,
because they're still stuck in trying to get approval from everyone around them because they're deeply insecure and they haven't really figured out who they are and what their values are.
right. Exactly, exactly. How did your mom approach that? I mean, obviously you birth outside the system, you have a strong voice about this. Like, how does she even bring this up to you, or does she just know that you're going to do your own thing? Like,
Yeah, I mean, we talk about stuff frequently. She's grown with me. In the beginning, I actually asked her to attend my first birth and she declined. And she was like, I don't feel able to be there like in a fearless state.
hmm,
And I was like, on the one hand, that like hurts my feelings because I'm feeling rejected. And then on the other hand, I really appreciate,
yeah,
opting out if you're not the right fit. And then in my second birth, she was here, more so tending to my daughter. She wasn't like in the room with me when I had my son, but she was very much in the house. So, yeah, I think for actually all of us, all of her three children have, as children should, have pushed her out of her comfort zone and into more of an open-minded state. But what I will really credit my mom, and me and my siblings for is we've really valued a healthy dynamic. And
hmm,
like we've worked for that, but part of that is my mom would rather be close to us than judge us.
right.
And
Because if you judge them, ultimately it's going to push them away
of course, I mean, right? We see it
all
everywhere.
the time.
Right. And I have so much gratitude for the maturity in my mom
Yeah.
to see that because she gets to be really close to all of her kids as a 65-year-old woman.
That takes a lot of maturity to actually own that I can't handle this and I'm
Hmm.
scared. And so I'm not going to be participate in you because so many parents sabotage births just because
Hmm.
they're too scared.
Yeah.
And you probably know way, way more about that than I do. But if we could get to a point where everyone could do what they want without having to worry about what their parents are thinking, that would be ideal, right? Because in the end, I don't care if you like pharmaceutical medicine. If you're a big pharma girl, I don't care. You're probably not going to seek my services, but that's okay. I
But
re-
but bigger than that, what we're really saying is around taking responsibility.
yes.
And the like caring what people think and having these conversations, those are all just like elements of are you or are you not owning your life and standing in your truth and taking responsibility for yourself and your choices and your actions. And most adults are not.
Yeah, full radical responsibility and power is what you need to do to get out of this old paradigm. It takes some balls. It takes a strong person,
You
but
cannot say it takes balls on my podcast.
sorry. What do you say then?
You can say it takes courage. You can
Okay.
say it takes ovaries.
It takes ovaries. It takes courage. That would be the great thing to say.
It does take courage and it takes self-awareness and it takes, I mean, it takes a lot of stuff that I think a lot of people are just beginning to scratch,
Yeah.
scratch the surface with.
I just remember the pressure. I was in osteopathic school because I thought, oh, osteopathic school is more integrative and natural. So I remember when I was in osteopathic school and I'm just getting like, drugs and surgery and the comments they made were insane. And I dropped out. I mean, what people thought of me was insane. I was going to go to this like witchy naturopathic school now instead of like be a doctor. And it took a lot of like mental strength just to like hold myself because I didn't have a lot of support because no one knew what I was doing. They just saw me drop out of medical school and they just thought I was going crazy, you know, but I knew that I just like, if I wanted to heal myself, what do I do if I have a sore throat? I don't want to take the drugs that I'm supposed to be giving to patients, you know? So I just knew, like, I know that there's a system of medicine out there that can cure people quickly. And that's what I was on a mission to find. But that took a lot of strength to just like not let the outside noise of people's calling me crazy when I did leave that allopathic system of medicine. So if we continue on, like, what was the side effects of the Flexner Report? You travel in history, and one of them is that as they made medicine more and more specialty based, the whole profession of obstetricians came up, right? And when that came up, we had a mass exodus from home birth to the hospital, and that happened really around 1940, 1950, right, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, it started before that, but by,
Right.
I think it was by somewhere in the mid 40s, it was like a very small percent were still at home.
Yeah. And honestly, this is like a lot of this is your base of knowledge. Birthing is your domain. So definitely like hop in here. But, you know, just what it did was when you transition from a natural birthing, just natural process of life to a hospital, that you turn birth into a medical procedure now. And it became something to fear and something to be scared of. And something that wasn't natural, and that you needed some doctor to help you do it because this wasn't natural. And what the Flexner Report also did was, what it did to discredit other practitioners is it made them get licensure, and it made them get formal education. And midwifery wasn't part of that. It was passed on through mentor and disciple. And so basically midwifery declined. What do you know what was before, like, did most people use midwives before this, or did most people free birth, or was it a combo?
No, they definitely use midwives in our country, but and there were also physicians. There were like family village doctors
Mm-hmm.
who were male, you know, that was present before hospitals as well. Yeah, it's really a fascinating time in our history to learn
It
about.
really is.
And then when they enter the hospital, you know, they're introducing ether. And so women are birthing unconscious and the babies are born. I mean, babies are born drugged now. Um, so different drug, same shit, different drug, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's where the whole slapping the baby comes from, because babies were born barely conscious
Right.
because of how drugged the baby and the mother were. And yeah, man, the footage from back then, you know, it's alarming and it's gross, but also it's pretty similar to
Yeah, it
how it
hasn't
goes.
changed,
It
right?
really hasn't changed that
The
much.
drug has kind of changed, but the whole thing
Yeah.
it's disgusting when you look at the whole practice.
Yeah.
Um, there is a guy named Joseph Chilton Pierce. Are you familiar with him? He's known for his work on human development, particularly child development and consciousness. And his whole thing is to basically, how do you keep a consciousness intact from pre-pregnancy to, you know, birth into developing years, into how to keep a child's consciousness whole. And it starts in the birthing world. I mean, how you enter into the world as a conscious being is the most important thing. It will set the trajectory of brain development. It's just a critical part of just your whole entire life. It's how you're born. And so when they did that, you know, when they brought in fear, when they brought in medicine, sensory deprivation, the bonding, you know, taking a child away from a mother to weigh them and clean them with soap, that is like the most vital. The child needs to be immediately on the mother for emotional and physiological development. That's like the whole start of it. And so when you mess with these hormones and you take away the child, you are basically like disrupting the very first part of the consciousness to already get fragmented. And you can reverse all this, and you can heal from all this, but in the mass, in the way that we're birthing now, and this is why your movement is so huge. I mean, you're not just tapping into 1,000 women, you're tapping into hundreds and hundreds of thousands of women. You probably don't even know how many women you've affected, really, you know? And it's a huge movement, because not only are you bringing birth back home, but you're bringing birth back home away from midwifery, which we now know in order to be a midwife, you have to meet licensure quotas. And a lot of times they're doing practices that the whole reason you don't want to be in the hospital, is you don't want those practices, and that's what they're doing even at home. It's a glorified hospital. It's insane. And so your movement is just so big on a human consciousness level, because these babies are being born and there's no interruption in that natural cascade of events that need to happen. And so that's why I love your movement so much, because you're not only impacting birth and like in changing women and helping like women, right? Because we know women can get really messed up if their birth goes bad. It's such a powerful part of who they are. But you're affecting children 100 years from now. We're not even going to know, you know? And
well, and like, do you want your child's birth to be setting the stage for, you know, for what's the right word? I want to say this right. Do you want your child's birth to be something they have to overcome and heal from, or
right.
something that actually provides, you know, the most spiritually intact foundation in which to
Right.
thrive from?
Yeah, if we want our child to thrive, we want to keep their consciousness whole so that they can just move through life learning and growing as a normal childhood. But if you have to go back and try and heal what's been done, that can be detrimental. And a lot of kids don't have that luxury, because you would have to be pretty awake to say, I messed up and I have to fix this now, you know?
And I mean, I think healing is possible, but I don't know about reversing. I think healing, of course, I mean, kids are so resilient.
Yeah.
And kids can overcome, you know, but what happened, you know. If they missed their first, you know, bonding opportunity, that's always now gone. There will be more bonding opportunities in the future, but never that one.
It's a huge, and what, you know, this is part of, like, in the Waldorf education, I know that they can see how a child behaves, and they can actually go and see that where that initial fragmentation could have taken place, where they've missed critical parts of development, because maybe they were, you know, maybe they were birthed into a hospital, and their consciousness, and they got separated from their mom, and that initial bond was gone. You can see that come out in children 3, 4, 5, 7 years later through behavior and stuff. And you can chase back to, like, based on their behavior of where did that initial fragmentation come from. And so many kids, I don't even know, I don't think very many of the population actually can trace that back. They just think that it had nothing to do with how their kid is behaving now, right?
Conversely, I think about, you know, the freeborn, uninjected children that I've met, that my intuitive sense is, had they had surgery and drugs and injections, they would not be okay.
No.
You know, like kids who just are born just kind of more fragile, like spiritually fragile, and, you know, constitutionally, not even weak, just like, I'll sometimes be around those kids. I'm like, fuck, thank God that kid doesn't have 30 injections, because you would not be normal. You would not be okay. And
you
so
have miasms that you're born with. And I think that's what you're saying. If you take a kid who's already fragile and you inject them and poison them and do all these things,
and circumcise them, and
just so much like tragedy on their consciousness, they are going to be sick. And so that being taken away, now you just have a fragile child that just needs some homeopathy to kind of like help them in love, and
like we all have a threshold of how much abuse and violation we can withstand and still function.
Right. And it's different for everyone. Sometimes kids come in really robust and they can handle a lot. And like you said, the really fragile children, that if they had been subjected to that system, they would be really messed up people. And that would speak to the point. Well, I've met like normal vaccinated kids who are really healthy and thriving. Of course, they came into the earth like really robust. Their susceptibility was really, you know, low. Their vitality was really high. They can handle a lot more of this abuse than some of the really fragile children can. I think the birthing is such a big part of why we're so sick, because it sets the trajectory of how they're going to, you know, grow and how they're going to thrive through their childhood and adulthood. And so, you know, you can have a kid birthed into the hospital system, and you can nourish them, not vaccinate them, feed them really good, and they, you know, pretty much are okay. But it does play a pivotal role in why we are so sick. And it's one of those things that we might not contribute it to childhood illness as much, but I think it plays a huge role. Okay, so now we're going down so around the next thing that we know that is a big contribution to the childhood illness and to the chronic disease rate is food. And we know this because, food is the mood, food is the base of our health. And around so the post World War II, we had basically the instant food movement. Remember TV dinners with your grandma's TV tray? Swanson developed the first TV dinner in 1953. The fast food movement came in the 1960s. So just to give you an idea, 70% of American children's diet is ultra processed food. That means 70%. I mean, some of these kids see no life force in vegetables and fruits and in animal products. They see none of this. They just eat ultra processed food. And by processed food, we mean ultra processed grains, ultra processed sugar, and seed oils. That's what a lot of the junk food is. And could you imagine how you would feel if 70% of your diet was ultra processed food? So this is what most of our kids are living with. And so what also happened was, around in the 1970s, 1980s, big tobacco bought a lot of the big food companies and sent over their scientists from big tobacco to the big food industries to create chemicals that would make the food more addictive, make the food last longer on the shelves. And basically, it was the first initiation of chemicals into the food system. And these chemicals didn't exist. Our human bodies aren't meant to survive on eating these chemicals. So, a lot of stuff happened with food, with the ultra processed food. We also started monocropping, big massive farms of wheat and corn and soy and canola. And that's a lot of stuff that's in mostly processed food. And so in order to have that type of farming, you have to spray massive amounts of chemicals and pesticides and herbicides on it. And so you're getting toxic chemicals in the food itself, sprayed on the food through pharmaceuticals. And all of these chemicals are infiltrating every cell of our body. And especially on a growing young system, I mean, a young body can only handle so much of a toxic load compared to an adult. So you put this on top of vaccines and on top of just birthing and, being birthed into a hospital, and you're setting kids up to fail. And so we know that these toxic chemicals impact our hormonal systems. We know they impact our immune systems, our neurological systems. And a lot of these chemicals mimic estrogen. So what you're seeing now is typical puberty now in America for kids is 10 to 13 of years old. That's 6 years younger than it used to be in the 1900s. And so these estrogens are basically changing our puberty, our reproductive system. It's causing a massive rate of infertility. Everything is multifactorial, but this is a huge reason of it. I mean, breast cancer, which we know is based a lot of driven by estrogen, is 1 in 8 now. And our children, like I said, cancer rates are up 79%. It's not that hard to figure out why we're so sick. It's really impacting minority communities because 70% of food stamps that are bought are used to buy ultra processed foods. So one of the easiest things would be is just don't allow food stamps to purchase crappy food for your kids. That would make sense to me. If you have food stamps, you can buy meat and grains and rice and vegetables and fruits and stuff, but you shouldn't be allowed to buy a bunch of ultra processed food, with that money. And, the school lunches are the same thing. 70% of school lunches are ultra processed. That's going to be hard to overturn because you've got people now that are addicted to this food and they want it and they don't want to make changes too. So it's not only a change from the top down, but you got to educate people of why you don't want to eat these foods too. So it's a massive, we got a lot of work to do to change these statistics in America. I think it can be done, but it has to be done from the top down to regulate, to basically take out all of the revolving doors between the FDA, big agro, big chemical, big pharma, and the government agencies. But you also have to train people on how to eat and how to cook. Moms don't know how to cook these days. And so, okay, so what do processed foods do to us? And I think we all know this, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. It causes massive nutritional deficiencies. These monocrops have no nutrients in them, and they're lacking, and they're high in calories. So they're basically called empty calories, and that's what's contributing to why kids are so fat. They're eating a bunch of calories with no nutrients or fiber in it, essentially. It impacts their obviously chronic diseases on the rise, dental health, gut health, mental health is a big part. start. When you eat really crappy food, it messes, serotonin and that starts in the gut. And so when you mess your microbiome up, you're messing with your happy chemicals in your brain. And so we're seeing a massive amount of kids having anxiety and depression. And it's frankly just awful. And not only that, these foods are addictive. Like these chemicals, like literally, like in fast food restaurants, when you go by a fast food restaurant, you smell like the fast food. You actually aren't smelling food. You're smelling the chemicals that they release through the exhaust pipe to attract people that can smell it. And it's not even that you're smelling food, you're smelling chemicals. So these people design chemicals to make their food more addictive so that you will come back and purchase it over and over again. And again, it's like all about the money. That, and in essence, they want their product to last longer on the shelf so they don't expire, and to come back and buy it again so it's more money in their pocket. It's really disgusting what's going on when we talk about big chemistry and these chemicals. Like around the same time that the ultra processed food started in America, around the 50s and 60s, that's when the chemical era started too. And so before like World War II, we didn't use a lot of chemicals. We had a small little database of stuff that we used. And now if you look at like the American Chemical Council, they'll say there's over 90,000 chemicals and compounds. And so that's 90,000 chemicals that we're exposed through food, through pharmaceuticals, through face products, through just cleaning products. So our bodies literally don't know what to do with these toxins. And then the same thing that processed food does, that's what chemicals do, right? They affect the neurodevelopment, they're endocrine disruptors, like I mentioned with the estrogen, and they're a huge a reason why if you're exposed to chemicals, you get mitochondrial dysfunction, you get cancer, and because your body, you get autoimmune disease, there's toxins in your body, and your body is trying to adapt to those toxins, and it's saying like, there's a foreign substance in my body, like I don't know how to operate, right? Or like the cancer starts to grow. And it's just really bad what's happened with our food. And I didn't even get really into what's happening with the animal industry, which I don't want to go, like any of these subjects, you can deep dive into a rabbit hole and like really dig in. But, our farming practices, aside from like our massive monocrop farming, what we're doing to the animal industry, we've taken animals from grass-fed, grass-finished, living regular lives that, that we then, consciously kill and eat, to you mass produce them, you put them in enclosed structures where they never see the sun, you inject them with hormones and antibiotics. What you're getting, and when you eat those products, is you're just getting a toxic sludge of food. You're not eating healthy meat. So the meat from a grass-fed animal versus a conventional raised animal is going to have a high amount of omega-6s to omega-3s, which we know contribute to inflammation. So you're eating processed food, you already have a bunch of omega-6s in you from the seed oils. Now you're eating animal products that are grown conventionally that are just that ratio is way off. You're getting tons of inflammation in the body, which therefore is contributing to chronic disease. And so the bottom line is our food is toxic, and you have to make a hard, conscious effort to exit the big agro system. You have to eat clean, organic food that have been grown and raised properly if you want to be healthy. There's no way around it.
I mean, duh.
There's not even like, oh, we try a little, I hear this sometimes. I honestly work with a really great population. I work with people that are pretty awake to this. They've like free birth, they're already stepping out of the system. But when I hear someone say, oh, we eat, like 50% organic, well, that's not going to do anything. Like it's all or nothing with this, because you're trying to eliminate how many toxins your kids are exposed to. So if you're like trying to do it, well, that's great. That's a first step, but you really have to do it hardcore, because any amount is not okay. And they're getting bombarded by so many things. So whatever we can control, we need to control. Mm-hmm. That's not saying you don't go out to eat occasionally. I mean, do you ever go out to eat?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we all go out to eat occasionally, but it's like what we eat in the home for most of the time needs to be clean, and it needs to be a conscious choice. And it's the hardest choice. I mean, this was all sold to us for convenience. TV dinners, fast food was convenience. And I thought about bringing, women getting into the workforce and being removed from the home, but I'm not going to do that. Although that does play a critical role in like a healthy child development when their mom is not at home most of the time, right? But let me go back to, it's all about convenience. And so, yeah, does it take a little bit more time to cook a home cooked meal? Yes, but I can cook a home cooked meal in like 15 minutes, if I'm prepared. So it's really not that much of
I
an
mean, a
effort.
grill, a grill and an Instapot
Yeah.
are what keep our household alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it
I
is
mean,
true. It is a, I was gonna call it a financial investment, but I want to use the word financial priority because
yeah,
unless you are, you know, poor, 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 if you like make ends meet every month, where we put our dollars speaks to what we're prioritizing,
yes.
and people like to hide behind money or their
Yeah.
lack of money. But I do think for most people that I know of or have met or that listen to this podcast, it is about priority.
Totally about
And
priorities.
yeah, and there are some things that are just non-negotiable, or like for my family that are non-negotiable. Man, I feel it I think about it whenever I travel around fragrance. I mean, because I text you how upsetting it is to me, but I live a fragrant free home I live in a fragrant free bubble,
Hmm.
and it's very intentional. And, our home is free of toxins as far as I'm aware, as far as what I know about. And wow, because of that, as soon as I'm in default reality and I'm smacked with just all the chemicals, all the fragrances, I have an immediate headache. Like, I don't do well out in the world anymore because I have intentionally moved to the woods, detoxified my life, and taken a lot of responsibility for the health of how we live, very intentionally left cities and all of that. We barely drive and whatever. But I feel that fine-tuned health and then trying to ever operate in the normal world or mainstream. But I guess, yeah, I just want to reflect or mirror again what you just said, that it is a priority. It's an investment to make, energetically, of course, financially, but the mainstream, what the powers that be that would love for you to be sick and dependent, are offering you at the cheapest cost, we know where that takes you. And so a really obvious way to opt out of that is to invest in when you invest in a different consciousness, you're also investing in different products. You are going to do more stuff yourself. You are going to source from nature and your local community. And we pay a lot of money for the meat that we buy in comparison to the dog food that's available at our local grocery store. Like, I just won't eat that meat because of all the stuff that you said. Um, and so we make, that's a part of our financial um priorities. you
Yes.
know it's because it's a non-negotiable,
It's
but
non-negotiable for
yeah.
us too. And I mean, I can't tell you how many, and like I said, I work with, after I met you, and I really got, I don't see a lot of standard Americans as patients anymore. My husband might. And so I don't even think of some of the stuff he has to talk about with patients. But I
Mm.
remember when I used to see more standard American patients, like they would, talk about food prices and stuff, but they would be drinking wine every night, and that's not cheap. So like you said, it's just a priority. And you can eat relatively pretty healthy on a really
Mhm.
tight budget.
Mhm.
I mean, like for instance, like this regenerative ground beef at our like no local organic health food store is $6.99 a pound,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that's pretty affordable. That can feed a family all
Mhm.
day.
Depending on where you live, like where I live in rural North Carolina, the farms around here, I'm thinking of one in particular, they don't, they don't have a lot of money. They're just getting by, and so they aren't going to pay for the organic label, the process that it is to be organic. But when I moved here, I went and talked to them about it and
Yeah.
asked them about their practices, and assuming they're telling me the truth, it is organic,
Yeah.
and it's a small farm. So there is some effort, required to
Oh
break out
gosh.
of the Patrix, as Yolanda calls it, there is some effort required because the shit's not getting handed to you. And at the same
Yeah.
time, in some ways, it is easier than it's been for a long time because we can spread information and ideas, in a way now that wasn't available to our moms.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it takes courage to say, well, I'm going to call the farm and ask them what they're doing, and it's like, it takes like a little effort to like make sure, like, if I'm going to support your product, I'm going to like ask you questions about it. A lot of people don't want to do that. They just want to trust like but that, like you said, you have to do your homework, and it's just part of like, it's a little bit more work, but in the end, you ask them one time, let me know if you guys change any of your practices, and then you can buy meat and not have to worry about it anymore.
It's making me think about, this is kind of a weird turn, but also not. There was a period of when I first became a mom that I got really interested in reading about and learning about anti-molestation like practices. And I just wanted to, know what there was to know as I had a daughter. And I'm also a women's coach, so I'm like painfully aware of how many children, are violated by adults. And so one of the things that really stuck in my mind from this one book that I read was this woman said, it'll be awkward and uncomfortable to ask the school these questions or to ask the kids coach these questions, but you need to get uncomfortable so that your child doesn't have to be.
Yes.
And that really stood out to me, was like, right, my job is to ask the uncomfortable questions so that my daughter is never in a situation, as much as I can curate it, where she's uncomfortable or all the way to the degree of actually, being harmed. And it's the same thing here. Like, oh yeah, it's like a little extra effort to go to the farm. It's a little extra effort to like think about your budgeting and include a higher quality meat, or to go through and buy different products in your home, or to call around and source. Yes, it is a little annoying and it is going to take you some effort, but we're literally talking about not being one of these statistics that
Yeah.
Jen laid out, and
Yeah.
it makes me think about something Yo and I talk about a lot and kind of like make fun of a lot, because, something that will come back to us about ultrasound is people will be like, you're getting blasted with radiation, in so many ways. Like, you think one ultrasound makes a difference? And Yolanda, I'll credit her here, her response years ago was, well, exactly. Like, my job is to limit my child's exposure. It's not to just not care. The
Yeah.
fact that they're going to be exposed to some means I need to take even more
Yes.
responsibility for how I can limit it. So it's not, in this whole conversation, it's certainly not to overwhelm anybody.
Yeah.
It's to encourage and hopefully inspire more
Yes.
self-responsibility and awareness, because there is so much you can do.
Yes.
So much. And don't
And that's,
focus on the shit you can't do, but there's
yes,
so much you can do that absolutely makes a massive difference.
massive difference. And that's like such a great point, is you don't want to overwhelm people, especially people that are new to this journey. And that's like what I make to all my patients is like, look, we can't control a lot of stuff, what happens outside of the house, but we can 100% control what happens in our house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's to your point, is every decision matters inside the home. And if you have a tightrope in your house, then when you go out, then it's okay, because you know that a majority of the time that they're not exposed to this stuff. And you can't keep your kid in a bubble, right? I have seen families that keep their kid in the bubble, and that is no good either. I mean, these kids can't interact with the world. They don't have a lot of friends, and they live on homesteads where there's no people around them. And that's really great. They have removed themselves from society. And in one way, I super honor that.
There's a way to do that fear-based, and there's a way to do it in responsibility, and
Yes.
those feel really different to me. And I see families do it both ways. I know what you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, and I can think of so many families right now that they're living on the homestead isolated because they are afraid of the world, and they're
Yes.
afraid of what, the world is going to show their kids and teach their kids. And for me, I don't resonate with that.
Mm-mm.
It's to me, that's kind of just, you're actually inverting the toxic bubble
Yeah.
into, and then your kids learn to be afraid, and then everyone's neurotic. Whereas, there's another way to do it, where you can
Yeah.
alchemize all that shit, you can take responsibility, and then you can be strong and you can be
Yeah.
brave, and then you
Yeah.
can choose what your interactions are. And you can even love and appreciate the world exactly as it is, because you're no longer victimized by it.
Yes, yes, yes. We actually like, okay, like this is a good point. So, like, when you have jumped into the new paradigm, and in my world, it's a medicine paradigm, but in a lifestyle paradigm too, you can relate to the old paradigm because you were once in there. But when you're stuck in the old paradigm, it's really hard to relate to the people who have made that jump. And so, the most important thing that we can do is that's what they say. Actually, that is what the critics say about of people choosing this lifestyle is that you're going to put your kid in a bubble and they're not going to have any experience and stuff. But it doesn't have to be like that. If you nourish and you take care of what's in your house, you can go and flourish in the outside world. And that's what I encourage people to do. I mean, my husband and I can't wait to go to India with my child. I'm not going to go until like 7 or 8 when he can't run from me, but like to expose him to like massive mind-blowing stuff. You go into India, and so you want children, you want to be part of this world. We are humans, we thrive together, where that's what humans do. We're not meant to be isolated. And I do have patients, like you said, you've talked to a lot of people too, that when you are over isolated, it sets people up for depression, because when you don't have a
And
community of
neuroses.
friends, yeah, you are depressed. And that was a catapult for me actually moving out of Florida, is because I didn't have a big community there, and it was forcing me to be isolated because I didn't want to interact with the outside world there because I had nothing to interact with. And I knew that that was just the worst way to live. Yeah, we were healthy and we had everything good, but like without proper community and not without it being able to expose my son to real life, he wasn't going to have a chance. And so you have to be part of the world. The answer is not to be a bubble. It's just to control what's in your house and to eliminate as much as you can in the house so that you don't have to worry when they're exposed when you go out. And there are stuff that you can do, just like thinking like radiation, like, when you fly, you can opt out of going through the scanner. Yeah. Is it a little bit of a pain? Not really to me, but
I
some
don't
people
care.
say it is. But yeah, they'll pat you down. But I mean, come on, these people are they're just unconscious. They're just like doing their job, patting you down. They don't care. You know what I mean? It's like just opt out, because the amount of radiation you get in that scan it's not a big deal if you only do it once and you have no other radiation, but it is a big deal and you shouldn't subject yourself to it. So just do what it takes to get a pat down. And there's so many examples of that. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but that is the issue. You just consciously do it so that you don't have to live in fear about being in a bubble, because in the end, it's not about being in a bubble. We have to interact with the world.
But
It
how
is
you
hard to
do it.
interact with the world when you go to an Airbnb though, and there's like tons of toxins and
You know what I do now?
what
I email the Airbnb host ahead of time and I say, well, I lie. Well, it's kind of not a lie, but I say my daughter is severely allergic to synthetic fragrances. Um, and so yeah, I just send a little thing and I say, "Hey, my daughter's severely allergic to synthetic fragrances. And so if you have any, can you please sweep the space with as many days beforehand as possible? We won't be able to continue the stay." And I make it like pretty intense. And ever since I started doing that like a year ago, it's been great.
they do
There's
it.
nothing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh
If I
yeah.
say, well, I specifically say it's about a child. I
Hmm.
specifically don't say I'm allergic because no one
Yeah.
gives a shit about the mom. But if I say my child, then they're like, well, we don't want a sick child. And especially now that there is actual evidence that I like warned them. It's perfect. It's a perfect
Yeah.
idea.
That's a
Anyone can
great
take it because until Airbnb offers fragrant free,
option.
as an option, which maybe they'll do someday, but I have found that it's worked flawlessly ever since.
That's brilliant.
And so what I've realized is I can take more responsibility for how I travel and for example with the opting out of the scanner thing, the only way that can work is I need to show up a little bit earlier. I mean, I've never gone through them, by the way. I've never gone through them. But
Good.
my point is that
They're kind of weird, right?
no, of course not. That's fucking weird. But it's a good point of like I take responsibility for how I travel and I give myself lots of time because I know I'm gonna most likely do the opt out and get the pat down, which, I need a female to do it. And so maybe it takes 20 minutes to get someone in a busy Atlanta,
Oh yeah, because they'll make you wait on purpose,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
They'll
yeah.
wait to the side, and you could easily be like, "Oh fuck it, I'll just go
Well,
in."
and there's more males than females, and only females can do it, and da 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 da. But it's just one example of many. There are many, many, many that instead of feeling victimized by mainstream, there's actually so many ways you can play with it and take it lightly
Yes.
and come prepared. And just take responsibility for your interaction with it. And then all of a sudden, it's not actually a problem. Like zooming
Right.
out, what you are talking about is obviously a problem because we're talking about children, and children don't have agency to make these kind of decisions. And it's so depressing and sad that that there is so much evil in power. But at the same time, there's also balance,
Yeah.
and there is so much light, and there's so much choice, and there's so much good. And back to the bubble thing, like I love the world. I love traveling. I love the world. And so I can love the world and be very conscious about the pieces of it that I say no thank you to. But it doesn't have to be fear-based. It doesn't have to be even really that heady. And hopefully that will translate to really healthy children, not just physically, but mentally.
Right, right. And this brought up a point to me. It's like nothing really is mandatory. When you look into it and you're like, this does not sound right. I don't want this. What are my other options? All of a sudden, it all unfolds that you have so many options that before you don't think you have.
Or you find a different practitioner. So
Yes,
this is one of my litmus tests with a chiro or a dentist because I don't do x-rays. And so most chiros and dentists they will say, we won't see you unless you submit to exposing yourself with harmful radiation. And so I have gotten really clear about how I'm interested in hiring a dentist or hiring a chiropractor. And now, currently, the chiropractor I see and the dentist I see, they are totally fine with me not doing that. And that wasn't super easy to find, but I'm
yeah,
sharing this because as I got clear, the way in which I engaged with the dentist was really respectful and professional. And like I don't know how to articulate it. I just because I've had people deny me and like, oh, we don't see people who won't get the x-ray, and that lets me know right out the gates that's not a good fit for me.
yes. Yeah,
But
you
they
handle
do
the people with
exist.
kid gloves, right? Respectful. They're like little kids that you just have to kind of follow like their little like every company has their quirks or whatever. And then you're just like, well, I don't really want to opt into that part of that. Is that going to be a problem, And then it's the thing that this also is with vaccines, like when people say, oh, it's mandatory. I can't tell you how many people that are like pretty conscious think that it's mandatory. I'm like, have you ever asked if it's actually mandatory? Because mandatory often means highly suggested,
But
right? It's
nothing is actually mandatory.
nothing, especially when it comes to health. We are protected by international Nuremberg laws from World War II. Like you have to have informed consent before any medical procedure. So if someone is saying anything's mandatory, it's absolutely not. It's illegal. And you just have to ask. You just have to say, I don't like this. What are my other options? And it's amazing what other doors open up.
Yeah.
So
Or
let's bring this.
they'll
Let's
or
go.
they'll lie and say it is mandatory, and then you need to remember that you were hiring them
Yes.
and walk the other way.
Right, right, right. And yeah, but to your point, if they're saying it's that, then it's like, well, this isn't for me. Let me go call someone else. And this applies to everything in life. I was looking for
Mhm.
a plumber the other month, and like I rent right now, and they were telling me I have to get my landlord. Like four people told me that, and I'm like, well, I don't really want to get my landlord involved. My kid put a toy in the toilet. I definitely don't want to get my landlord involved. And I finally called the fifth one, and it's just like, just keep calling until like you get the answer that you want, because there's so many options out there. But this applies to anything in life. If you don't like the answer, say, I don't like it. I'm going to go find the answer that I like that resonates with me. And that's about being, you have to be, you just have to know that that's an option, because so many people are sheeple. That's what they want. They want sheeple. They want people that don't question anything. Let's talk about vaccines, because after big agro and big food in the 1970s and early 80s, the next big thing that really made a huge impact on our child's health is vaccines. And that was actually in 1986, they passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. Like I said, 1986. And what it did was it essentially gave legal protection, legal immunity to vaccine manufacturers, that you couldn't sue them if your child got injured from a vaccine. And so it incentivizes manufacturers to really not put safety first, because no matter what, they weren't going to get any
That
kind
is
of.
the most crooked red flag
Right,
thing
it's black. Right,
that
okay.
exists.
I heard someone say this and it really resonated. There is no other product in the world
Right.
that if it caused even one death, right? Let's take a car seat. If a car seat caused one death in a child, that car seat would be recalled immediately. There's no other product that knowingly causes harm that has no what's the word I'm looking for?
Accountability, recourse.
Accountability for what their product is. And so it's really mind-blowing. And when you actually, this is why I love to have this conversation, because when you know this, it's like, oh my God, a lot of people don't know this. But what that did was essentially what it did, they did create a VAERS system, which is a vaccine reporting system for an injury. But there was like a study done in Harvard in 2011 that said less than 1% of vaccine injuries are actually reported to VAERS. It's essentially impossible to get to get compensated for any vaccine injury. Some people have, yes, I think the number I read was 5 billion. They've made over 5 billion payouts for vaccine injuries, even with all of this suppression. So that's how dangerous the product is. But let's talk about numbers. Okay, so let's just talk about vaccines for a second. The entire schedule has never, ever been properly tested, no matter what we hear from vaccine makers and lawmakers. It never has. If you were to properly test vaccines like you do other pharmaceuticals, you would do a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. You would take two groups. One you would give the full CDC vaccination schedule to, and the other one you wouldn't give it to. And you would see the outcomes of the study would be very obvious what happens. And they won't do this study. They say that it's what do they call it? They call it like injustice. Like it's not fair to do this study. It's unethical to do this study because then you're vaccinating. But in a way that doesn't make sense. What do you mean it's unethical? You're saying it's mandatory for these kids to get all these vaccines, yet you won't do a study that proves vaccinated kids versus unvaccinated kids and see the health outcomes.
Well, I guess it would be unethical to test a vaccine, but to test something on a child. But if it was a willing group of parents who were already going to get it, but the bottom line is there's no incentive. They don't have to do it, and so they won't. Like, of course, they're not going to.
It's like, don't worry, trust us. We got it. We got these injections. Your safety is important to us. Don't even question it. Don't worry. We don't need any information. Trust us.
It works.
It works.
It totally. It's fucking wild. But parents, our parents just like dropped us off at a school with hundreds of people and adults that took care of us all day that they'd never met. Like, we are a society, generations of society that parents are not properly bonded to and connected and protecting their children. We've been surrendering our babies to the system for a long time. So this is so deep in the expectations of how a family rolls,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, and to that point, no one wants to inject their kid with poisons. No one wants to have a baby that is going to have a side effect of these vaccines, but there are ingredients in there that are just like very questionable. And all you have to do, if you've never done this, is Google CDC vaccine ingredients. You'll get every single vaccine and they'll list every single ingredient in that vaccine. And what you'll see is pretty eye-opening. Aluminum, mercury, we all know that, aborted cell lines, antibiotics, monkey kidney cells, formaldehyde, and it goes on and on and on.
Well, I disagree with you that no one wants to inject their kid with toxic chemicals. Like, yes, they very much do. And it is for social good. It is to protect everybody. And it is what you do. And therefore, it must be okay. And they are willing on some level to both surrender their authority of their children, which is, of course, on the heels of a fractured birth, being separated. They are not properly bonded. They literally do not have. I mean, we have generations of the dominant culture is not properly bonded to their young. Whereas you look at the free birthers and they're like, literally over my dead body, am I going to surrender my child to the government? Like, come for me, motherfucker. No way. Right? Like, that is a distinct difference in mama bear versus instinct injured non-thinker.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I meant was if you were to say, hey, you're about to inject yourself, but you're to your point. for the greater good, some parents would do it. And you saw those parents when they voluntarily signed their young child up to get the COVID vaccine. Like,
but they do it in the pediatric, they do it at the hospital.
yes.
People are willingly injecting their kids with bullshit every day. I mean, that's
when a newborn baby is born and they go to give the hepatitis B vaccine, it's got 250 micrograms of aluminum, which we know is well above the limit for even an adult size human. So why are they continuing to do this? And maybe that is, your point is actually more valid, is that, yeah, people are injecting their kids for the greater good, or for bypassing what's in these vaccines or what it can do, but we're going to do this for the greater good.
And there's two kind of sides to this. One is, I think it's very, very hard. I think most people are unwilling to admit nefarious intent from the system.
Yes.
Which is almost funny. Like, if it wasn't so dark, it would be kind of funny. Like, just look at history, and like, when did the system become well intended for the common person? Like, at what point? You fucking psycho, like, that is a weird cognitive dissonance commitment that a lot of people have. And then the other piece is that people like to be told what to do. Yeah. And they are not in relationship with taking responsibility, which is kind of the theme of this whole thing. And when you're just kind of used to doing what you're told, which women are groomed to be from the moment they're born, and that is the social expectation of a girl who then eventually becomes a mother. I mean, it's perfect. It's such a perfect, almost seamless system of control and domination until you free birth. And then it just interrupts the whole fucking thing.
Yeah, it does. So in the 1980s, there were 7 vaccines given. Okay. And now we know that by 18, there's between about 80 vaccines given it. And if you take that number and you say, we're counting by disease, because a lot of vaccines are 5-in-1s, 3-in-1s. So if you take that number and you take out like every single number of the disease it's protecting, by age 2, kids are getting 40 to 15 vaccine doses. And by 18, 100 to 130 now. And this isn't going to stop. They recently added COVID to there. There's thousands of vaccines in the pipeline coming, especially when chronic disease is, picking up. There's going to be vaccines for cancer, vaccines for, we're seeing a Ozempic for obesity. They're now saying that kids that are obese under 6 or over 6 can have Ozempic. Well, okay, but that's $1,500 a month. It's good. Medicare is going to start covering it. So now you have you have all these kids that are obese that are now going on Ozempic being paid by the government. We don't even need to talk about what that's going to financially do to the government. But all you have to do is take ultra processed foods out and get them into nature, naturally moving like kids like to do. No kid likes to sit there. Have you ever met a kid that likes to sit there? Only ones that are extremely dulled down or have autism and they're frozen in time. Those are the kids that sit still. And so it's really crazy. When you look at these numbers and you look at like what they're willing to give kids, but anyway, it's when we know that food impacts biology of a kid. When you start feeding a kid, how you feed them, like, can turn on genetics, and it influences the human beings through all their lifetime, right? What are these injections doing? You're throwing hundreds of missiles into a very vulnerable system. God. And you wonder why kids are so sick. And for people that say autism is not caused by vaccines, wake up. How many stories are there where parents are saying, my kids are normal, and they go in for their shots and they've never been the same?
But no one gives a shit what a parent says.
Yeah, right.
Once you're out of the cult and you speak about the thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
It's not the vaccine. It's like, it happened. It just happened overnight that
it's just random.
Yeah, it's random event. It's really disgusting. Okay, the next point I want to take, and this is, I think, not so much, it is impacting physically, but it's really impacting kids on a mental, emotional level and spiritual level, is the educational system. And we know, So the public school system is, we know the numbers are going down. We know parents are starting to wake up to this, but I do think that not enough parents are awake to what's going on into them. Enough are awake, especially free birthers. We have a rise in homeschooling. We have a rise in alternative education, which is really great, but there's still a lot of kids that are in this public school system. And really there's two things that are going on. One one we'll have fun talking about is like the agenda that's being brought in through this like the woke kind of liberal agenda, where they're bringing inappropriate sexualization of different types of literature and stuff into the education, and it's just not appropriate. It's completely age inappropriate. It's confusing kids. They're supporting kids that are confused. Kids are already naturally confused. And it's so, I'm confused. I don't know what I am. Oh, you're a boy. You're a boy to the 6-year-old girl. That's a girl, And then and now governors are passing laws where you don't even have to talk to the parent about that. If the 7-year-old wants to change their sex, it's between the school and the child. Now it's the parents.
I can't believe that anyone still lives in California.
I know.
Like, I can't believe that parents.
I mean, you live there. I lived there. I lived there a long time in my childhood. And we went back recently. And when they passed SB 277 in 2015, my husband and I were very, very upset because we love California. California is the greatest state. It's beautiful. There's just so much to do. There's so many good restaurants, and they have ruined it. And you can't live there anymore. No. I have recently talked to someone who was like wanting to go back. They escaped from COVID and they want to go back. I'm like, what are you going back to? And the only people that I can really, it's like these communities are in a bubble and they're outside the system, but they are going for those communities next. They're going for the homeschoolers next. And so to your point, I don't know how you can live in California in any way. But the one of the even more that's actually, it was talked about a lot when it got implemented, but no one's really talking about it anymore, is Common Core. And Common Core is basically, so Common Core was around 2010, 11. And I'm not completely confident on that year, but it's around that time, under Bill Gates, through the Bill Gates and Melinda Foundation, and 5 other people overturned the educational system essentially overnight. And none of those people have degrees or doctorates in education or human development. They're just, lawyers and people kind of part of the big technocracy. And so what the aim of Common Core was to standardize education so that the third grader in California would have the same access to the information as a third grader in Florida. But we all know that standardization doesn't work. A one-size-all approach to education doesn't work. People learn in thousands of different ways. But what I'm gonna go over, like what it's done to the consciousness of humans. So we know when a child develops, like what cognitively develops, around 0 to 7 is a creative, like a magical thinking, imagination type of stage that kids are in. And that's the goal, is to keep kids as in that stage, in that time of their life. You really want to keep them in their creative processes. Around 7 to 14, they start to develop abstract thinking, but abstract and critical thinking happen in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And that doesn't get fully developed until late teens, early adulthood. And so when you're exposing young kids to critical thinking that's not appropriate for their age, essentially what it does, and what my husband says, is it like breaks their brains. They actually can't handle that type of thinking, and it sets them up for failure in the future. And so what it does is, when you suppress creativity, what you're doing is when you suppress creativity through abstract thinking, you're essentially setting your kid up for they're not going to be cognitively flexible. So when you nourish the proper brain development and the neuroplasticity that happens when brains develop, so like new brain grooves, when you expose your child to something new, they make new brain grooves and stuff like that. But when you do it in a way that's not appropriate, exposing them to like analytical thinking and critical thinking that's not appropriate, and they get stressed, they're making these brain grooves based on stress versus based on like new innovation. And essentially the net effect of this is that you get a very narrow-minded kid that can't think out of the box, that can't like put together, because if their brain hasn't properly developed, then what happens, like how you critically think and put pace, when you go into a creative mode, you get creative and then you can start to piece stuff together and stuff. You don't have that when your brain hasn't developed properly.
No, it's fear focused.
It's fear focused, and it keeps kids locked in a narrow mind and that's actually what they want, right? Like, you don't want people in society to think out of the box. You want people to line up, take their drugs, and think and work and do their job, and that's essentially what they're creating with Common Core. And it's detrimental.
Soldiers, little baby soldiers. Yeah,
Yeah,
you get
little
induced
baby
in the
soldiers.
you get induced in the hospital, and then you sign up on the assembly line and you take your place.
Yep.
They're little drones.
Yeah. And the net effect is a decrease in intelligence overall.
Mm.
And it's like, why would you develop a system of education with a net effect of a decreased intelligence? If you cared about the human body, like that's all that matters, is you want to let people be creative and come up with innovative ideas so that we can like change society for the better. Anyone who's really creative, like it's like impacts people all around them. Look at like what you've done, but when you have shut all that down and you really put them in a box, we're not going to, like, these kids aren't going to have, it's depressing, right? Who wants to follow in line and be a sheeple? Like, nobody. So we don't really know what the implications of this is going to be because it's so new. 2010 was 14 years ago. That's crazy. But we do see kids with anxiety and depression and stuff like that. And that my next point is going to also answer why that is. But the education system it's scary to me in one way because the other stuff is so obvious, like vaccines and food ingredients and stuff. But this is something that we don't see happening, right? And parents are so busy and so stressed, and it's scary to me. This part of the education system is scary to me, and I think that you have to opt out. You have to opt out of the public school system if that's in any way possible.
Well, of course it's possible.
Yeah, of course it's possible. I know, like, maybe I shouldn't say this, but like the state of Arizona, it's really interesting. They give, if you don't send your kid to public school, you get $7,000 to apply to tuition of any of your choice, books, if you're homeschooling, books, curriculum, and stuff like that. So essentially, you're paying tax to public school, and if you don't opt into that system, they're giving you that money back that applies to the school, which is really cool. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of the Democrats don't like it, and they're trying to shut it down. But it's a really interesting system, and it's incentivizing parents to not send their kids to public school, which has consequences too, because now public schools aren't meeting their quota. More kids are going out, and they're not getting as much money because they don't have as many kids, and so the kids that are forced to be in public school still are not getting the education just because they're not getting the funding.
There's nothing to fix. It's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's working perfectly.
Yeah.
Just like obstetrics, just like hospital birth, just like the pharmaceutical company, there's nothing to fix.
Yeah.
They're fucking thriving.
Yeah. This is what they want. And then when you say like, this is what they want, it's like so hard to imagine that this is like actually what the human conditioning wants for our population. But this is exactly what they want. Sick, dumb, and to be slaves. That's it. So the last thing I think is the most recent thing that's come up, and it's social media, tech, and devices, right? And this is an area that's all new for us because devices really came out around like 2006. The smartphone came out, and social media really came about in between 2010 and 2020. And so obviously we're seeing a rise in like kids on digital platforms and on social media. But what we're seeing is a tremendous effect on mental health. Like kids, increased screen time is highly associated with depression and anxiety among kids. It promotes negative self-comparison, feelings of inadequacy, social isolation, but it's hitting that dopamine center, right? Like each like, share, comment that you get, it releases dopamine and it creates a feedback loop that encourages you to go back on the screen because you want to get that hit more and more. But what's happening is when you're living your life on a device, and you're getting these serotonin rates and you're scrolling through so fast, getting desensitized to like the norm, the actual normal life is too slow for kids.
Mm.
And then they get diagnosed with like ADD, ADHD, because when they're off their boxes, they're like, it's too slow. So they start moving fast to kind of counteract that. And nature is too slow for them because the devices are so quick. And so we really, it's a fine line between, and it's causing massive amounts of mental illness. I mean, suicide is up. We know that, okay, so this is a crazy statistics. Adolescents who spend 3 hours a day on social media are 2 times at risk of getting anxiety and depression and suicide, right? The average time a teen spends on their phone as up to summer of 2023 was 4.8 hours. So this is setting our kids up for massive mental depression. And it's a problem that we need to really like consciously go through because tech is offering so much value to our life, but at the same time, it's really affecting our kids.
But there's
So
no reason a child should be on a phone.
I totally agree. There's the guy that's speaking out most about this called Jonathan Haidt, and he says the 4 norms: no smartphones before 16, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, and more independence, free play. And here's the big one: responsibility in the real world. Because when you give kids extra responsibility in the real world, they feel valued and they feel part of something. And that's a problem is because we're protecting our children so much, we don't give them as much responsibility in the real world. Like walk to the mailbox to get the mail. We're scared someone's going to take them, or get a job at 16, you know? And so really we have to kind of nourish like kids in the natural world more and more. And eventually they will get on it. And we just try to teach them how to consciously be on the device. And that's a big, big thing to overcome because it affects adults as much as it does kids.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I know
So do you think do you have enough to say about the solution that we should just cut it here and this will be the problem and the next episode's the solution?
Oh yeah.
So then I think we're going to leave it here and this will morph into a 2-part episode, and so we've just spent all this time really fleshing out the problem, these main facets that have led to sick children. And so we're going to come back next week with the solution. So try not to be too depressed in the next week until the next episode is out. And really, I encourage you, if you're feeling jazzed up about of everything we just covered, come up with and brainstorm with your partner or with your friends or your mom friends. What are some steps, that you feel really willing to do right now in a non-fear-based way? And I think that's a really interesting and important aspect of what we touched on today. We don't have to be afraid of toxins. We don't have to be afraid of factory farming. We don't have to be anxious that our kids are going to interact with the internet one day. Something I say in my coaching a lot is awareness instead of fear. So we can use our fear kind of as like a bottom rung piece of information and evidence to then get us really curious about where can we take responsibility and what is here for me to be more aware of. And that's where the power lies, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, Jen, thank you so much. And we covered so much ground, and we're going to be back next week getting into the solutions. We're going to share things that both Jen and I have implemented into our own families, and cover just all sorts of ways you can start applying how to take responsibility, how to, what's the right word? Yeah, how to really apply real-time solutions for health, for really accessible health, nature-based health in your family today.
Yeah. Essentially, we'll talk about how to live and thrive in the new paradigm.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. So we are back with part 2. We had a fairly depressing conversation around everything that is wrong, why our children are so sick in America. Well, not our personal children, thank God, but why our children of our country are so sick. And Dr. Tice brought forth these foundational, reasons, and broke them all down the best she could in a short amount of time. So if you are just tuning in this week and didn't hear last week's, stop, go listen to it so that you can get all juiced up for what we're about to get into, because we're breaking this down into 2 parts, where last week was the problem And then this week will be much more uplifting and inspiring because it's going to be about what we can do about it. It's going to be about solutions and how to, really discern like what is ours to take responsibility for, what is within our control and power. It's so easy to feel victimized, by these big systems, these evil systems that are, just clearly nefarious. And it's really easy to make up that we are too small to affect change. And it's not true. I understand and I relate and I've been there, but we have so much more power for everyday choices towards health and freedom than you might know. And so, yeah, I'm excited to get into just some real applicable solutions. Where do you want to start? Should we do like a quick review? Where do you want to start us today?
Do you want to do a review? Okay.
Everything,
Well, I can do
the
like
review is like everything sucks. Everything in the system sucks.
We know how sick our children are, and if you want the statistics on that I gave, like refer back to the podcast. But the big highlights of what I touched on are the key events that set the motion into the deterioration of our children's health are the Flexner Report that came out in the early 1900s, which led to allopathic medicine being the dominant school of medicine that was, and where they basically took all types of alternative medicine and marginalized them and essentially tried to wipe them out, which they were not successful, thank God. But it did set into motion a lot of how medicine, how we grew up with medicine, how our grandparents, and then one of that side effect is how we started birthing. We left birthing from the home and we went into the hospital, and it became a diagnosis and a problem versus a natural occurring event. We also talked about big food, big chemical, big agriculture, and how that is one of the main things that really plays a role into our children's physical health. We then went on into the vaccine agenda and talked about just the sheer number of vaccines and the legislation that basically gave vaccine companies immunity to lawsuits and litigation, which therefore really increased the vaccine schedule and the amount of vaccines our children are getting. And then we talked about school and smartphones and how really those are impacting more on a mental and spiritual level. And so, yeah, like Emily said, we want to really be solution focused. That's always how I want to be, because it is important to know what's going on. You can't just like put your hand in the dirt, because that's not good either, but to know what's going on, but then say, okay, well, what can I do to opt out of all of this? And it's actually pretty easy. It's nothing that has to be super stressful. So let's get started with some of our keynotes. So my husband and I, like we always call this is like the natural foundations. The return of man to nature is what you need to be. The reason why we're so sick is because we're so removed from nature and the natural occurrence that should be happening. And so really what we try to do is live in this world, this modern world, but try to be as close to nature as possible. So let's break that down. I think the best one to start with is the most obvious is clean food. We need clean food, period. And the bottom line is cook homemade food, make your food, get rid of anything in a box, read ingredients if you are buying boxed food. And I like what I kind of saw a term floating around on social media called single ingredient eating, where everything that you eat is one ingredient. So if you're making a dish, you use some butter, use some soy sauce, or but everything's one ingredient. It's not from a box that has like 20 chemical ingredients. And I think that rule is pretty great. Homemade food doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to take a lot of time. I think that's where people get confused, is they think they need so much time, but it's really easy to put, a protein, a carbohydrate, and a vegetable on a dinner plate and cook that within 15, 20 minutes and have a really healthy meal. Of course, the vegan diet is much more elaborate and it takes a lot more time. But if you're eating like an animal-based diet or you're getting a lot more variety, then it really doesn't have to be that hard. Buying local is best, buying organic and local is best, but that's not that's not available for some people. So buying standard organic food from a big market is second best. And, there is, people will argue with the organic concept. And I get that argument, right? They say that small farms can't get certification for being organic. And I think Emily made this point when we were talking about food, is just go to the farmer and ask them. I was at a farmer's market one time and I was asking them, they weren't organic, and I was asking them if they spray, and they're like, honey, everyone sprays a little pesticides on their food. And I'm like, well, that's not true. So you'll get the answer if you ask. But eating organic as much as possible. There's a study on EWG that compared, yes, organic food, mass-produced organic food does have pesticides, but what they found was mass-produced organic food has about 2 to 5 residues of organic or of pesticides, versus conventional produce has about 24. So that's a big difference in the number of chemicals that you're eating. So buying organic food is really important. Non-GMO, things like a peel that's coming out, like just anything that's coming out that's technological based with food, stay far away from it. And it's pretty easy. I mean, you're just going to be eating meats, grains, vegetables, fruits, anything that is just from nature. That's what the traditional cuisine is. And it's really, if you're somebody that is used to buying packaged food, even organic, healthy packaged food, your tongue gets used to eating that stuff. So if you don't have a taste for it, just give it time, because the tongue will adapt to these foods that are more natural, versus like all the chemicals that are in food are there actually to make you more addicted to them. So it does take like a detoxing kind of process on your tongue to get rid of that taste for all this chemical food. But EWG's Environmental Working Group, it's a great resource. I'm going to mention it when we talk about chemicals again, but it's a good resource. Every year they put out their top 10 most contaminated foods that are conventional and their least contaminated foods. And so if you can't buy organic, that's a good list to refer to, because it will basically say if the food is in the top 10, you cannot buy it conventional. Strawberries is usually pretty big on that. Another good rule of thumb is if it has a peel. If it has a peel, it can be somewhat protected, but we all know as a system that does stuff get absorbed, and there is residuals inside the food, even if it has a peel. So that's not my favorite rule, but that is a general
But a
rule.
strawberry is like a sponge.
Right. Right. And it doesn't have the peel where you can peel it. Cucumbers, you can peel, avocados, things like that. But anything that's just exposed, grapes are really high rated with high pesticides amount. And that the bottom line is to eat homemade organic food. And it doesn't have to be like a big process. It can be, you can do it at really cost effective way, and you can do it really cheap too.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's so many different diets. I don't really want to get into individual diets, carnivore, vegan, stuff like that. But there are some tips that I have in my home that I can kind of live by. Like, I have 2 boys. I know that they're going to be going through a lot of food. One thing that's really helped us out is that I always have beans on. I always soak beans for 12 hours, cook them for 12 hours. And so that if I'm ever like, we're out, it's 5 o'clock, my son needs to eat. When he needs to eat, he needs to eat. And if I don't have dinner prepared, I can always put rice and beans. We always have rice going. We could always put rice, beans, and a veggie, and he can eat that while we get dinner started. So little tricks like that really help, so that you're not caught in a situation where everyone's hungry and now you have to cook like a homemade meal. Another idea is I would cook lunch and sometimes dinner when I got up in the morning, so that it was pretty much all done. Maybe I had to like cook the vegetable for 10 minutes or something, but the meat and the grain or the rice is already done. So there's a lot of ways to approach this that doesn't have to take a lot of time. But you do
Also, shout out for the Instapot.
Do you guys like the Instapot?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It does everything, and it's so fast, it's so hands off.
Yeah, it's a really great tool. Do you guys cook your meat in it?
No, we mostly grill, and
Okay.
by we I mean him. But like we can do, rice in an Instapot in 15 minutes
Right.
and smash burgers on the grill, in a couple minutes. Just like quick and healthy.
Yeah. I would
Trying to
say
think
my
of what
average
else, like
time to,
hard-boiled eggs. We always have hard-boiled eggs as like a quick grab because I get
yeah.
weird. I'll like have
Mm-hmm.
3 cups of coffee and not eat, and then I'll just be like really
Mm-hmm.
weird and there's not time.
Mm-hmm.
But the real, like what's underneath all of this is some of you are listening to this and going, I can't do this. And I don't know your life, so whatever. I don't know what that means, really. But I do know that for me, no one taught me this. And I had to choose it and learn it and prioritize it. And, I've eaten clean and healthy and also been pretty darn broke. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a matter of priority and where you place value because rice and chicken are not that expensive,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
The beans, either like dried beans, like you can't get cheaper than that. Rice, beans, ground beef, even
Mhm.
not ideal ground beef, conventionally raised ground beef is still like $3.99 a pound. And you can argue that that would be better than eating anything from a box, anything organic from a box either. I'd rather see
Mhm.
fresh food. So
Mhm.
no, you can eat, and vegetables are pretty cheap. You can eat on a budget really easily. It is totally about priority.
Also, I know a lot of people live in cities, and so this might take effort and you'd have to like go outside the city, but be having relationships with local farmers, like we talked about last time, it takes effort, but then it's set up. I mean, we buy chickens from a chicken farmer nearby who's a friend of ours. We get raw milk from a farm nearby. We get produce from a farm nearby. And we know these people. I mean, some of them are our friends, and then others, we've gone there, we've met, we've asked the questions, we've seen what's up. And there's a spiritual component to having an actual relationship, to having, to shaking hands, to seeing where the food grows or where the cows stand that
Mhm.
is, you know, like obvious, right? But the actual connection points and having that be more of a real through line. Yes, it takes effort. Yes, fast food or frozen shit is in some ways easier or faster, but it comes at a greater cost in other ways.
It is a spiritual issue. There was um, I heard from a spiritual teacher in India that if you eat food within a 10-kilometer base, that the earth has actually the knowledge. So if you walk barefoot on the earth has the knowledge of what you need, and it will actually put those nutrients into the food based on, makes an argument to grow your own food. But I think that's pretty cool. It's like you're walking barefoot creates your own multivitamin if the food is grown near, versus food growing around the world. It's processed, in the other state, then it's trucked across the country to you, where that's like and then you buy it in a big store and you don't know how many hands have touched your food. You don't know like this journey for food. And then there's a farmer down the street that's growing a cucumber that's probably a little cheaper because it didn't have to go through all that gas. So sometimes organic local produce can be cheaper. And also too, I would argue in a city, there's a lot of resources in a city. A lot of farmers will come to the farmers markets. A lot of good cities have really good farmers markets.
Mhm.
And a lot of those farmers will come to those farmers markets. And so sometimes a city might be easier than being in a rural area where you
Yeah, that's true.
have like a huge farmers market. I think it's all excuses when people complain that food isn't a priority, because I mean, we all get tired and we all are hungry and we all sometimes don't want to make food. And even then it's surprising what you can like put on in 3 seconds, And so it really is an excuse when people I can't eat healthy or I can't cook.
And there's no denying nutrition being at the core of how you can reverse symptoms, how you can facilitate healing, how you can, I mean, your vitality is so directly linked to the food that you do or do not eat.
Yeah, food
There's
is the
no
heart of the
denying that.
medicine. If
Right.
you can have the greatest supplements and herbs and everything in being put in your body, but if you don't have food as a foundation, then all of those become useless.
And yes, I acknowledge I'm drinking a Zevia out of a can while we have this conversation.
I didn't
Yes,
even
I'm
know.
a walking contradiction. Duh. We all are. We're gonna go can free. We decided That's like our next step when we have cans now and we're gonna move through them and pod free. We've had an espresso that I
Mm,
love. And then my buddy the other day was like, they have one too, and they were like, we've made all these efforts to clean up our lives, and then we're heating plastic 3 times a day. Like, what are we doing? I was
yeah.
like, oh my God, duh. So
Yeah.
cans and the pods are our next level cleanup.
That coffee thing's a big deal. Even naturopaths will have like those pods in their office, and it's kind of like that doesn't make sense. I always
Right.
just use a simple French press, glass, can't beat glass. And you don't have to. A lot of those machines, by the way, have mold in them too.
That's what he said. Oh, so
Mhm.
gross.
It's
Yeah,
really gross. And
we're moving
speaking
through
of
it.
mold, let me bring this up because this is like such a big movement that I'm just terrified out are these pouches that everyone gives these kids. And yeah, there's these healthy pouches and they'll be like meat and vegetable and fruit based, but a lot of those that they find, like not only do they contain lead in them because of the packaging they're in, but a lot of them are moldy.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
I really, really encourage patients to get their children off of those pouches. And also, what is it teaching kids when they're just like sucking down their food all the time? Like they should, instead of sucking down an apple, they should, because it's in a puree, they should hold the apple and eat the apple. I mean, these like 7-year-olds, you don't need a pouch everywhere you go. And so I don't want to go on a pouch rant because I definitely can, but I would definitely, if your mom likes healthy minded and you're still buying those pouches, I definitely encourage you to get off them.
Mm,
They're
okay.
easy.
Yeah, totally.
They're easy. So that's like another point is like, what do you pack? Like, your kids, you're going to the park and everyone, the snack movement. Oh my gosh. I don't want to go on a rant on the snack movement too, but I've never seen so many snacks before until I had a kid and I went to the park and literally I see people, they come to the park and they like don't even go and play. They're like, oh, it's time for a snack. And I'm like, whoa, you guys weren't even playing in your snack. Well, then of course my son wants to know what everyone's eating and stuff like that. But we don't need to be like snacking all the time. I mean, like kids, yes, they like to snack, but what happened to like an apple as a snack or a veggie plate with hummus as a snack or like snacks that are actually real food? So many of the snacks, even the organic snacks drive me crazy because they're loaded with sugar and they still have to be processed and they're still ultra processed food, even though they're organic. So, when we eat organic, you made a point that I want to go back to. When we eat organic, yes, we are eating for nutrients, but really what we're trying to do is minus the chemicals in the food because they've done studies on nutrient content in produce from like 1970s to now to 2010, and 2010 is the last number I saw. And basically, produce is devoid of nutrients by like 70% because of farming
Whoa.
practices and stuff. So that is an issue onto itself. Is the value of nutrients in the produce is much lower than it used to be, mostly because no one's using like permaculture ideas and remineralizing soil and stuff. But really, the motive to really eat organic is to minimize all the chemicals and the toxins in the food.
Hmm.
Yeah, food's a
Crazy.
big one. I would say like I could have a patient for like a year, and there's some stuff that you talk about once or twice and then everyone gets it. Food is one of those things that
Of
every
course.
single appointment will always talk about food. And it's just yeah, it's just a hot conversation. There's no one size fits all diet. Like there is not. Diets
No,
are
of
very,
course.
very
And, I think for a lot of people, they become parents and it becomes justifiable or easy to get lazy with the food because they're stretched, and maybe they're overwhelmed or stressed because they're juggling more. But the irony is like it's the biggest responsibility to lay the foundation for a healthy relationship with food, and what you set up in your kids in their first 5 to 10 years is setting up the foundation for their entire life. I mean, it's such a big deal.
it's the
And kids
big.
are going to eat the way you eat. So,
Yeah, that's the bottom line. If I
yeah.
have a kid and my mom says they're so picky, then I start questioning their diet. But parents sometimes they want their kids to eat super healthy, but they don't want
Mhm.
changes in
Totally.
health. That will work for the first 2 years, and then the kid will start eating what you want. And so it really is, it's a lifestyle change that's super important. One thing that really helped me with a baby is I was always burning fresh food because you put it on, then the baby would need something, and then before you know it, so I did get a baby steamer. that in a glass container. It had the glass one. And so that it could, so I can put everything on, like I can put the rice on in the morning, I can cook the meat, I can put some veggies on, and right before we're about to eat, I press start and it steams it. And then I don't, and then if I have to go do something that it's still good, I'm not going to burn the produce. So that really helped me with a baby.
That's funny. Okay.
Food,
What else you
food
got?
is the heart. Food is the mood. It creates your mood. It creates everything. It's the foundation of health, and you cannot be healthy without a healthy diet. And that's the bottom line.
You know, this lion diet thing that we did was so cool. It was so, it really wasn't hard. And we only did it for a week. It's not like that amazing. But still, so a lion diet is red meat only, salt and water. And we did it as just a reset. And I wanted to just kind of reset my brain around treats. And I was in our whole family was in such a treat, like Suni calls herself a screeny sweetie or a treaty sweetie when she's just saying she just wants sweets and screens, you know? And like, of course, we don't give her that much of either of those, but still, it's like if she, anyway, so we were like, okay, we kind of need to reset here, and doing it and pulling our diet back literally as stripped as you possibly can, literally red meat, salt and water, um, totally reset. And after just a couple of days, the idea of like a bite of Greek yogurt with nothing in it, just a bite of Greek yogurt felt so decadent.
Right.
Just it
Before you'd be
brought
like,
us,
I don't want yogurt.
yeah, it brought us down to just simplicity and really got us out of the treat loop that we felt like we were in. Even if the treat was just a small bowl of raw, ice cream, or raw milk ice cream or something, still the consciousness and the relationship to the treat and the reward system there was just something I wanted to reset before I got pregnant again. And anyway, it like totally worked.
It does. It really works. This is the concept of fasting and therapeutic diet. And a lot of fasting has gotten like a lot of negative attention, especially on social media, but it's a therapeutic tool. We've used fasting for thousands and thousands of years. It's in most spiritual
Because
literature.
it's so mental.
Yeah. And you don't have to, people say don't fast your hormones and your hormones, but like the thing is like fasting, it's not only a digestive break on the system, but it's a mental break too, and it's a reset button. And there's so many ways to fast and do this reset button. The true and classic one is water fasting. You be surprised how long you can live on just a water diet and feel really good too. Green juice fasting is another one. Carnivores won't like that one. And then there is like something like the Lion's diet, which I find really, really, I like it for moms and dads who have young children, because it's really hard to water fast and be around life. It's because when you water fast, you like need to sleep a lot, and like your whole life changes. But with something like the Lion's diet, where you just eat meat 3 times a day, it's enough to give you energy to get through the day, but not even just give you energy to get through the day. Like you actually start feeling really good, and you actually are like really thriving and feel and doing really well, especially day 3, 4. But so it gives you that energy of the day, and also your kids are seeing you eat, so they're not like wondering why mom and dad aren't eating anymore. But it's such a powerful way to reset, and like I said, it resets the digestion, but it also resets the tongue and just your cravings, like where you would maybe crave chocolate every night, now you're like, ooh, I really want an apple. So it's good to do that. It's good to be disciplined with our diet to do this once in a while. It's really great to do it before you get pregnant, just to give yourself a reset. But therapeutic fasting is super beneficial on health. And in some of the spiritual literature, it's they would do it like 4 times a year or around the seasons. And sometimes that can see, well, that's a lot, but like once to twice a year to really kind of give your life a break from food and just kind of be you. And what also you see is how much time you have. Did you notice how much time you had?
Well, I don't make any of the food. So either way.
even just like you would eat like a piece of meat and then it'd be like, okay, we're done. Let's like, when your kids aren't home having a nice dinner for lunch, it'd be just like you would eat and you would just eat your meat and go on versus like eating
So
for like,
simple.
yeah, super simple. So
And
it's
if we eat food in such a reactive state, because we live in such a reactive state, and the lion's diet made it so like simple and not heady, and there was nothing reactive there. There was just it was like quiet. It was simple and quiet, which I guess is the point of the reset. Because
yeah.
there
And what
wasn't
it,
like it wasn't great, it wasn't bad. It was just eating for fuel and then move on
yeah,
with your day. It was nice.
that's what I was actually going to say is when you do something like the lion's diet, you you stop eating by cravings or because you're hungry. You just eat to get that energy and you're a little hungry. And then you like go on about, like you said, go on about your day. You're not eating from cravings and stuff. And it's like, actually, it's really it's a mind, you get a break in your mind a little bit. I encourage anyone that is leaning to, of course, you don't want to do it when you're pregnant and when you're breastfeeding, although
Why not?
you could definitely do the lions. I was referring to like water fasting
Oh,
in general, but you could definitely do the lion's
totally.
diet. But I encourage everyone to get familiar with it and do it. It's such a therapeutic tool, and it's also a very good tool to heal symptoms. By the way, there is nothing better than water fasting to get rid of a symptom. Like, and obviously that doesn't work with children, but if you're an adult and you have like eczema or something, the magic, my patients always want a magic bullet, even though they're hiring me and they're into alternative medicine and they'll do the work. Everyone still wants a magic bullet. And that's my
You're
husband.
like starve yourself for 5 days,
No,
honey.
for real. Well, yeah, I mean, kind of.
Yeah, of course.
If you've been suppressing eczema with steroids and you want a magic bullet, the best thing is going to be a water diet
Or
until
any vaginal stuff, any
yes.
like yeast infection, bacterial vaginosis, burning. I mean, any skin stuff
Anything,
makes sense.
any
Yeah.
chronic disease is it's a lifestyle thing usually, and it's
Yeah.
usually related to food. So just devoiding of that and letting your body in it, what it does is 80% of our body's energy is diverted to digestion every day. So we have a certain amount of energy that we wake up with, and most of that is used to digest food. So you take food out of the equation,
Mm.
now your body can use that energy to heal. And
Mm.
then if you don't need to like heal really, then it starts to really like ramp your system up for optimal health. And so it's such a huge therapeutic tool that I think that everyone should be aware of.
Okay, so clean up your diet, fast every now and then, reset your mind around food. Food is the mood.
Let's
Let
go.
food be thy medicine. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, what's next?
Okay, let's talk about clean home. And this has to do with like chemicals and toxins and stuff like that. So when you talk about clean home, there's really like, what are you cleaning with? What are you using in your home? And then also what your personal hygiene products are, right? And anyone who's been in Freebird for a while knows that most of us don't wash their hair, right? Thanks to Ariel. So and when you start looking at how many chemicals are in beauty supplies and products, it's pretty eye-opening, especially natural ones like Jason's or Avalon. You still turn over the ingredient list and there's like 10 ingredients that you can't pronounce. And it's
Oh my God. And Miss Myers,
toxic.
I can't handle it. I can't believe people still use that. Stop using it. The fragrance are so toxic. It was like a level 10 on the Dirty app. Do you know that app?
That's the EWG.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it is cool. It is cool. No, Miss Myers is a marketing. Now, here's the thing. They don't have any regulation on this. So they can market that it's healthy and non-toxic, but it isn't. And Miss Myers is one of those. You don't have to have any knowledge in chemicals to smell it and be like, this is a chemical shitstorm, you know?
But people like that smell. It makes them feel fresh and clean.
Yeah, yeah. But so yeah. But start looking through what are you using for hand soap? And then also too, I just had a conversation with a patient. She was saying her hands are so dry. And I said, well, how often do you wash your hands? And she said 15 times a day. And I said, 15 times a day?
With soap.
Huh? With soap.
With soap,
Why are
yeah.
you washing your hands that much? She goes, how much do you wash your hands? And I said, once or twice. She goes, how come you're not washing your hands? So I wash. And it's clearly just two different ways of thinking. But if you if you're touching raw meat or something, I'll wash them and stuff. But but that's the chemicals, when it touches our skin, it messes with the microbiome, with the natural bacteria on the skin, and then we get dry skin. And we can go into like what each chemical does. I don't think we really like have the time to do that, but just look at what products you're using, and how clean can you get the products,
and fragrant free.
fragrant free.
So anything should be free and clear, right? Like your laundry detergent, whatever. At the very least, it should say free and clear.
Yeah, laundry detergent is important. And then, so not only what you're putting in your body and on top of your body, that's just as important as food, right? Because our skin is the largest organ in the body, so it absorbs all those chemicals. But then you talk about the house environment too. Candles are a huge source of toxicity. And I don't know how much of this audience is using some of this stuff. I think some of it is I think most people are kind of starting to be awakened to this, but go into an Airbnb, and like we've talked about this, where you would email them, but like all those plugins for like fresh and clean. One of the most toxic exposures of one of the highest toxins in our house is actually from the stove and cooking. So making sure that you're using the air vent. Cook outside is ideal. That's how we like traditionally always cooked, was outside the home. Grilling. There's issues with grill. There's issues with everything. You can really pick apart everything, and everything has
it was a big deal for us to invest in cast iron, like a cast iron set, and do away with all other pots and pans. And it was a big investment to do a full set of those, but it feels so good.
So what should we be cooking with? Cast iron is great. Stainless steel is great, and glass is great. Those are like pretty much your three things that you want to cook with. There's some technology out there that I just like don't trust. Like I don't trust the healthy nonstick cooking pan still. I just like don't trust that it's not off-gassing. But there's ways to, like, on a nonstick pan, let's just take eggs for example. You can use a stainless steel pan, and you can put vinegar in it actually. So first of all, it won't stick onto the pan if it's hot for a certain amount of time. So heat up the pan is what they say. But even then, sometimes it sticks on there. So I just put a little bit of vinegar in it, let it sit, and it like comes right off. So you don't really have to buy these like not like the marketed healthier options for like cookware and stuff. You don't have to buy those kind of new technology if you stick to cast iron and glass. And
they last forever.
They last forever. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, that's like what we're cooking with is really important. What we're putting on our body, what is in our air around us, in our house. These are like really, really important issues. And it's very overwhelming, Emily. Like when people start, like, especially if maybe they're starting to come along with food, but then they, you start looking at your life and you realize, you hear this information, you're like, oh my God, I got a lot of work to do. And there's two types of personalities: the ones that get rid of everything and just like start fresh with nothing. And that might be a slow build up, or you just take one thing at a time, right? You, finish using your Ziploc bags and you switch over to a reusable Ziploc bag for your children's apples or snacks. I keep on saying apples today. I must want an apple. And so just take it a step at a time, like when your toothpaste runs out, if you're not using an ideal toothpaste, then just switch, the next time you order. So it doesn't have to be a drastic move. It can just be like one thing at a time. And before you know it, you'll be like, wow, I'm done. I'm good. We're good here. Check.
Are you ever really done? Are you done?
No, I don't think so. I think you always find
I'm sitting here with my can.
I think that, I think there's always more to do, and that's okay.
Okay. So what else? Don't inject your kids, Obvi.
Yeah, let me finish with kind of like the basis. There's two more with clean. So clean food, clean home, clean water. This is really important too. And so I've seen a lot of argument on not drinking properly filtered water, but here's the thing. Yes, it takes out the minerals, but if you don't filter your water out and you're on a municipal, like a city water, you're getting tons of toxins, chemicals, fluorides, pharmaceutical residue, VOCs, just so many if you look up your city water and you look up what's in the water, I mean, there's like hundreds of substances in there. And so when I see, especially on social media, that you shouldn't drink filtered water, I'm just like, wow, this person's really off the mark. Like this wellness account, maybe we should ignore this wellness account. But you have to filter your water. Now there are situations where you don't, like, are you on city or are you on well? There's not one answer for water because it's so individualized, just like everything. So are you on city or are you on well? The answer is you should get it tested, or if you're on city, you can kind of look up the city report because they have to do those yearly. Well, there's a lot of issues with heavy metals and like things like arsenic and stuff. So you would just want to have, I don't like to filter out well too much. I just like to make sure that you're taking all the bad stuff out. So putting a good carbon filter on your house is usually sufficient on a well. If you're on city, you're going to want to have something a little bit more robust to filter out all of those chemicals. By the way, I shouldn't let wells get off the hook this easy because there's a lot of groundwater contamination issues with pesticides and stuff like that. And so the answer is you should test your water. But with the city water, you're going to want to get it filtered. So, and then do you rent or do you own? Because that's going to be like how much financial money you put into like a system that's going to be a permanent one. But the answer is you should filter your water. The two best ways to filter your water is distilled and RO. And the reason why are those are going to be the only methods that take out most of the toxins. So then what you have to do is you can't drink that water. It's dead water. So you have to remineralize it with a good trace mineral. And then you can get fancy and like swirl it and vortex it and get like the structure back in it and stuff. And so if you rent, what I suggest is getting one of those, gosh, I'm going to blank on the name, one of those like crock pot thing, not a crock pot. It's like you buy like a 5-gallon water, you fill it up at the health food store, right? You go and get the RO water at the health food store. You buy trace minerals, you put it in the water, and natural, you want to match there. You can buy a TDS meter on like Amazon for like $10. And what that's going to do is total dissolved solvents is TDS. And you want to match that as close as you can to a natural spring water. Now, natural spring water varies between what minerals are, in it and stuff, but somewhere around like 130 is where you want to be with the TDS. So you kind of learn, you may remineralize it, test it, and you get around that mark. And then you have mineralized fresh filtered water. If you own
like that,
just like that, no, for real, it is. If you own a home, you put a RO system at the sink. And you can also look at a whole house water filter that I think is like really, that's one of the best options. There's so many companies that do that, and some of them are scams. So you do want to do your homework, but that's what you're going to want to do with water. Now, if you can't put a whole house water on the point of where it comes into the house, then you're going to want to look at getting a shower filter. The only thing that a shower filter is going to really do is get out chlorine, which is going to make a big difference in your skin. But it's better than not having it at all.
Water's such a trip because if you don't create a life that has access to clean water and prioritize it, it's pretty overwhelming to try to replicate it.
Yeah.
It was our number one motivating factor of moving to where we moved was water independence, and to have, water independence, period. Yeah. And then it can't be, it's interesting because it's what's actually like the most foundational, building block of everything else.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to the natural man in the village, they showered in like the river, that's like they had fresh water to shower in. They drank river water. Like that's what we're used to. And now we're drinking and we're bathing. I didn't even get to like water bottles and stuff, but like those toxic water bottles. Okay. Do you know that most of that water, there's a movie, it's old. I don't have Netflix anymore, but it was called Tapped, I think, TAPPED. And it's about the water industry and essentially like Dasani, I think. That's Coke, right? Dasani? It's Coke or Pepsi. Essentially, they fill up those water bottles with tap water, they don't filter it or anything. It's tap water. Now, some water bottles are like RO'd or like, filtered properly in clean water. Of course, those are like $5 for like a
Right.
12-ounce bottle. But most of the water bottles, and then they get transported on a truck that's really hot. And so all those chemicals and the plastic are leaking into the water. So that's a big, big issue with those types of water bottles. So I just say, forget plastic water bottles unless it's like an emergency or on a road trip and you just need, one. That's fine. That's like more living normal. Versus, I see people still buying 24 packs of,
Oh my God,
the grocery store.
But even in most places, you can find a glass water bottle.
Yeah.
Like if it's an airport or, something like that, but glass and then at the very least spring water, even if it's plastic. But I was going to say, there's that guy, Danny Vitalis, who created that website of where all the natural springs were in America. And you can find the map and find where there is flowing natural springs. And so I've known a lot of people who have their 5-gallon things and they've used that map to go fill their water up with living, totally unfiltered living spring water that's, just pouring out of the earth. And that's pretty cool. And that is available, that map. I don't know. You'd have to Google Danny Vitalis.
It's like findaspring.com, I think.
Yeah, findaspring.com.
Yeah, it's a super cool resource.
So cool.
Okay. So, and we kind of touched on this, but I'll just mention it one time specifically with this one issue is clean air. The air that we're breathing continuously is we need it to be clean. It's one of the most toxic things we're exposed to. And obviously we can't help the air quality outside of the house. So we really have to focus on the air quality inside the house. But particularly mold. Mold is the biggest issue with air quality. And open your windows every so often. Let that fresh, let it breathe like a living system. Don't continuously keep a closed home and, keep it stuffy. Let the air breathe. Be really, really mindful of mold and water damage. If you have water damage, do everything you can to get it taken care of quickly so that you can prevent mold. Because the truth is once mold really starts to take over a house, most remediations don't work and it will grow back eventually. And so the mold issue is, and that's like something obviously by region, but I live in Arizona and there's still a mold issue here because they built most of the roofs flat. So if they, have snow or rain, then the water will sit there and then it gets compromised at some point and it starts to link in. So there's a lot of mold issues around here. I also want to say this, we all grow up in mold, especially like you, Emily, in Florida. I grew up in Florida. Like we definitely grew up in mold. And that's one thing is our terrain, our vitality should be good enough to overcome that. So it shouldn't be a huge worry. Like I don't worry about mold where I am right now, but my vitality is high. I'm healthy. I eat clean food. I drink clean water. So that's not a big of an issue. But if you are in a moldy situation and you're already compromised, you already have like an allergenic state, you're already on hyper alert, and then you put yourself into a mold situation, then that's just going to make your symptoms really flare up. So the mold is a big issue. I would say that, sometimes, I take cases, sometimes like I have a skin case I'm thinking of right now where the child has eczema and the mom's like, is it because of mold? Because that's what all her food, all those groups say. And I would say that's the least of my issues right now. This kid's fully vaccinated. Their diet's a little off. Like, let's get these things in line and see if it clears up before we go to the mold, because she had a new house. This house was just built 6 months ago. Like the chances of her living in mold is thin. So
but mold is like trending right now.
Mold is trendy, and
it's become like an identity.
Yes. And that's it. In most of the time, I don't take a lot of mold cases because most of the time we get the symptoms better without having to deal with the mold. Although if there is known water damage in your area and you have black spots growing on your wall, that needs to be addressed. Yeah. But if you're healthy and your symptoms are going away and you feel really good, then, and there's no water damage in your house, then I wouldn't be concerned about it. And I wouldn't think that every ailment is caused by mold. So it's like, it is real. It's a real issue, but it's also being like way, way over talked about, and people identify and they don't let it go either. Once they've been mold infested, they're
mold victims.
They're mold victims. And that's what we don't want to see either. Yeah, it's crazy. Parasites and molds. That's like how
parasites is like the old one though. Now the people who had the parasites now have the mold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe they do. Some of them probably do because their susceptibility is so low, right? Like the terrain isn't right. And so that they're more susceptible to these outside influences. And obviously the goal with that year to be that your terrain is really healthy, your microbiome is really healthy, you as a person are really healthy, so you can be put into these chemicals and it just kind of, you can detoxify them correctly, right? Because we have a natural detoxification process in our body called the liver. And so when you are exposed to these stuff, you should naturally be able to detox them where they don't create symptoms. But if your body's overloaded and we have a known exposure that's not being taken care of, then it could be an issue and it should be addressed. So it's a fine line because like literally every patient that comes on thinks they have mold, and I would say maybe 9 out of 10 don't. So it's not as big of an issue as it's being made into, as far as like actually affecting the health. Okay, next one. Next one is, I talked about really all of these are just connecting back to like the natural human state, right? Clean water, clean air, this is all stuff we used to have too before like big chemical and big agro really like tainted our society. But part of being a natural man is to be outside in nature. It's one of the foundational things that we need to do to be healthy. And I've seen numbers floated around. I've seen like 3 hours a day is a minimum that you should spend outside a day. But that doesn't happen very much. Think about Monday through Friday for a normal person who works like 8 to 5. Like how often do they go outside that whole day?
I think a lot of people are never outside.
Never outside.
Like never.
Never.
Yeah. Like they walk to their cars.
Right. Even really healthy people that buy organic food and drink clean water, I think that we're missing the mark on this, and we really have to be outside more. Get up early and go for a walk. That could be an hour in the morning, and then spend as much time as you can outside. I think a lot, part of this working from home kind of movement that's really going on, it allows that flexibility. So it's really, really nice.
So awesome.
On a nice day, you can go work outside on your computer and be outside.
We just took away TV during the week, and it just opened up all this space where, we've gotten into rhythms in the past where we, after dinner chilled like with a family show, and then we just stopped that to see what else would happen.
Yeah.
And we were outside.
Right.
Even if it was just like laying in the lounge chair and Johnny throwing the football with Suni, like nothing interesting. We're just hanging out outside, which I don't know. It's not like, oh, it's so revolutionary, but it literally took us saying no to this one habit, which has its time and place. I'm not even dogging on it. It's definitely a time and place thing. But in the absence of that being off the table, that's what emerged. And it just feels so good.
The natural man wants to go outside. It's like, you sleep inside and then pretty much you lived outside. That's where you did everything. And so like you said, you take away like technology, like a phone or a TV, and the default is, well, now what do we do? Like no one wants to sit inside, let's go outside and breathe the fresh air.
We've like had this sadness in our family because we used to walk all the time when Suni was young, but now she doesn't want to go on walks. And we can't, she's too little to leave alone. Like, need to bring her. I mean, sometimes we walk on our land and let her stay at home, but like, if we're going to leave for an hour, she's too little for that. And so we've been like having to get pretty creative about how to get her. I mean, bribes work really well with that, of course, but also just shifting what we call it. Like, I know not to ever call it a walk, but I'll call it like a fairy hunt.
Right.
Or, like, let's go pick the newest flower that's out. Like, if I get creative and actually think ahead, I can trick her. But those family walks, though I'm not allowed to call them that,
So when you guys cut out TV, did that help her like want to walk, or does she just want to be outside?
No, she doesn't want to be outside usually.
But
because also, to be fair, she spends all day outside, like at school. So by the time she comes home, she just like kind of wants to cuddle and color and keep it mellow. But I've been sitting on the screen all day, so I want to go outside. And so we have to get creative. But the family walks, the point is the family walk is hit or miss. Sometimes it's like so terrible, and like Sawyer poops his pants and Suni falls down and hurts her knee and cries, and like it's just a total shit show. But when it's
and you know what you do at those times? You say, this was a bad day, but we're gonna try again tomorrow.
Yeah, we're gonna try it again. because
I know, I
mom and
hear you
dad
on
like to freaking walk.
Kids, that's actually, I relate to this a lot. Like I would exercise in the morning before kids and before sunrise, and then at night I would walk for, an hour. And
Ugh,
yeah, with kids, the whole thing gets disrupted. And once,
so
yeah,
annoying.
I mean, when they're easy, you can put them in, your little pouch and stuff. But when they start to get like one thing for my son is, he loves to like bike and scooter and stuff and
Mhm.
skateboard. So that's kind of, sometimes he rides his bike while we like
Yeah.
walk. But you really have to be determined to like go outside and move your body with kids, because you can have every excuse in the world
And
to,
just be the leader.
yeah,
That's the thing I noticed is like, I just have to be the leader.
yeah. Like if your kid's like, I don't want to go. I'm like, you're 3, you don't have a choice. I'm going, like you come
But
with me.
then you're up against like, how are you willing to go through the fight? But what I know with her is once we get her out there, she'll shift.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yes, family walks, anything outside, working outside. I mean, working from home means I can be outside a lot of my day, which is so big.
Yeah, when you're not like reporting and stuff and you have to be inside. One thing about being outside too is like if your kids are being told by somebody that they have too much energy or they're
Right.
ADHD or they are
I know.
having behavior issues, that it's a high likelihood that they're not using enough
Mhm.
energy and they're not outside enough. And so if this is coming up on the radar of your kids, like the answer is go outside and take them to a park. Like let them burn that extra energy off, because we're misdiagnosing kids, especially young boys. And I say that because they have a higher risk of being diagnosed with ADD and HD than girls. But this applies to girls too. If any of those diagnoses are coming up on the radar, there's a chance is that they're just not outside playing enough. Go out and make that part of the routine, and then see if those symptoms get better, because there's a likelihood that they will.
And or not sleeping well,
Yes.
you know.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. So actually that brings me to my next point is good sleep. We all know we need to sleep. I'm not going to go into statistics on like why we need to sleep. How many hours do you guys sleep a night?
Oh my God, so much.
Yeah.
It's gonna make people really mad. I mean, I sleep like 10 hours pretty much every night.
That's great. So that's like 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., something like that.
Johnny
Oh,
gets 8 and I get 10, and that's like perfect for us. So we are in bed lights off by 9 in the winter. We have a different flow in the summer,
yeah.
obviously, but in the winter, like right now it's November, we are by 7:30. I'm like, let's start our nighttime thing. By 8:30, we're lights out doing our like last little ritual. We do highs and lows every night where everyone says their high and their low of their day. We're doing that by 8:30. I mean, we don't like keep track of this. This is just the natural flow. Our kids don't have like bedtimes and we don't actually have that much structure. This is just our flow right now. And then, yeah, we're asleep by 9, and then he's up by 5 and I'm up by 7.
That's amazing.
7, what is that? 10, 11, 12,
That's 10
7.
hours.
That's 10 hours. Yeah.
9 to 7. That's amazing.
It's just like always how it's been. I
Yes.
need 10 hours. I don't do that well on 8. 9's like, but when I get 10, I'm like fucking ready for the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think and that number is individual. Like you said, some people can do great on 7. Some people can do great on 10.
Oh my God.
Some things I want to bring up about sleep. Well, sleep issues is really, really common. And, I've seen like homeopathy really help, but I've also seen just like the vastu of the whole bedroom be really off. And so by vastu, that is the Ayurvedic version of feng shui, right? And so like the area that we sleep in is really
Mm,
important. So there's like some tips on that is like airflow is really important when you sleep.
mm-hmm.
So if you want, so maybe during the day you open up the windows when you're not in there, especially if it's cold, to let that fresh air in.
Mm-hmm.
The American Association of Sleep, I'd have to look up like the specific thing, but they recommend like what temperature in the middle of summer do you put your air condition on to sleep?
We keep it pretty cold.
Yeah,
But where we live, we can have windows open like 2 seasons of the year,
that's
which
amazing.
I always would choose. Like right now, we can sleep with our windows open. But we like it really cold.
Yeah. So the Sleep Association basically said that if you have air conditioning, that it should be set at 68.
Yeah.
And that's like really low for some people. Some people, I always ask patients that have sleep issues, what do they sleep on?
I think
Granted,
that's what we have it at.
I was in Florida, so our air was running most of the time, which was one reason why we wanted to leave. I'm like you now, I can about 2 seasons of the year, we can have the windows open. But most people like sleep at like 74. I've heard patients say 76, 78.
That's
and I'm
hot.
like, well, we need to lower that temperature, and maybe we don't need a remedy, you know, maybe it's just actual the sleep, the environment that you're sleeping in isn't conducive to like actually getting a sound sleep. But the vastu of the bed, like how much stuff is in your bedroom, you know, like that big bulky furniture that our parents grew up with, and just like, you know, this is not even talking about a dirty room, like how like a lot of people sleep in pretty messy rooms.
And like laundry piles.
I
can't do it.
Yeah, no, I can't either. I have to clean even if I have a laundry basket, like, you know, my son throws it everywhere. I'll put it in a pile and put it towards the end of, you know, by the wall. So it's at least an organized laundry pile. But just like, if you can't sleep, look at what is going around inside your bedroom. Make your bed every day, because there's nothing like getting in fresh sheets at, you know, at night. The direction of your bed is super important. They always recommend you know, but I always refer to like Ayurveda. Ayurveda is a super interesting science, because it's the only science that told you how to be in your human body and how to like take care of your body to be healthy. Like a lot of other forms of medicine just teach you how to like get rid of like your disease or suppress your disease. And naturopathic medicine came from Ayurveda. Some naturopaths probably don't know that, but it's true. Like our medicine stemmed from Ayurveda, and the direction of your bed is really important in this. And they say that you should always be sleeping. Your feet should be pointed either either east or north. And you definitely never want your feet pointing south, because that is the direction of death. And so, and I've literally had patients where they change their bed configuration and their sleep totally changes. That's a big deal. And so just kind of looking, if you don't, not directionally like sense, like just put your iPhone, put the compass on and see, like, when I mean feet, I mean like your head, like you have your head here and your feet, where are your feet going? Like, where are you looking when you sleep?
Right. Like, which way are your feet facing?
Yeah. So I love sleeping east. I just think that there's something really powerful about waking up to the sun rising or that first light and seeing that. So no matter where I am, I always put my bed facing east. And if my bedroom isn't conducive to that, then I'll probably like sleep in another bedroom and just use the master bedroom for like something, like another playroom or something. But I am so sensitive to the direction of the bed.
Interesting. Because to me, I would think like the flow of the room is what matters. Like the vibe of how the room is laid out, but I'm going to find out which way.
Well, I mean, how it's laid out is super important. And Ayurveda goes into some like, you know, they're the most detailed science ever. And they talk about, you know, like directions of the house. Like if your bedroom's on like the southeast versus northeast. And so like you can get like more and more in depth and on like the directions and stuff. But, do you know what direction you sleep in?
Wait, what was it? What was the bad way again?
South.
That's what he said.
That's what he's saying. But you guys sleep so good, so
don't fix what's not broken.
Yeah.
He said our feet face mostly south, a bit southwest.
Okay, so you're more in the southwest. Yeah, if any sleep issues did come up, that would be something I would like look at. Another thing with sleep, and I'm going to talk more about this, and I might actually just jump into this, is like location of a smart meter. Do you know what a smart meter is? It's on your house. And what I have found too is that I had a case of a little boy who, like, the mom, he couldn't sleep. And, you know, everything was really great with his family, like food and just consciousness and just like everything, she was doing everything right. And so I said, could you do me a favor and locate the smart meter on your house? And so long story short, the bed where his head was the wall. And then here was the smart meter.
So EMFs?
Yeah. And so, and that's my next topic is EMF exposure. So we'll kind of do a crossover, but smart meters, you know, they used to be analog meters. And so for people who don't know, smart meters are the machine, the device that like your electricity goes to, that they can measure out how much your electricity using and then, bill you for that. And they used to be analog, and then they went digital, and then they went smart meters. And this was a huge deal, like around 2014-ish. I remember we were signing some like petitions and stuff, but basically there's two issues with it. Is the amount of EMF that they give off is huge, to the point where they reported that thyroid disorders, like starting if you like sleep next to a smart meter, sleep disorders, all kinds of ailments come if you're near a smart meter. So that would be something, is to locate where your smart meter is and make sure no one's sleeping there.
And can't you can buy something that goes around it. Someone I used to know was like obsessed with those. Yeah, like a
Faraday cage. Yeah. So you can buy a Faraday cage if there's nothing you can do. But here's the deal. It's almost illegal for any electrical company to not take off their smart meter, because it wasn't a voluntary opt-in. It was like it just happened. So you have to actually opt out. And so I have yet to know of an electrical company by county or state or whatever that you can't get it removed. So when they remove it, they do put a digital meter, and the hardcore people will say that's not enough in analog, but it's honestly impossible to get an analog unless you, like, I had a friend that saved hers from like 1990, so she was able to put that on her house, which is pretty cool. But digital is much better than smart meters. So there's two issues with smart meters: the EMF, and it's a privacy issue. And if you want more information on that, there is a documentary called TakeBackYourPower.net. That's really important, the net part. It's pretty mind-blowing. I would love to rewatch it. It's been like several years, but that's the bottom line, is the amount of information they can get from these devices is beyond, it's disgusting.
But you mean because they're tracking all of the
They can track
electrical use in your
everything. And they can, but it's not just tracking electrical use, because who cares? But they like just they know everything you're doing, everywhere you're walking, everything. And it's not like the electrical companies are like monitoring this, right? But it's just uneasy knowing that someone could have access to that if they tried.
So switching to digital is
So yeah, and like in
preventing that.
Florida, it was really easy. Like you could just go into your account, and you'd have to actually, they always make it a little tricky, but you put smart meters in and you actually opt out, and then it was done. In Arizona, I had to call the company, and they tell you it's not bad, not bad. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And eventually I get it off. Now they do make you pay like $100 to get it off. And then some places make you pay like $5 to $10 a month, because they have to send someone out to read the meter. So there is a little bit, like a little bit of money involved in it, but and more so than privacy issue is a health issue. It's just, you just don't want to be around it. You don't want your kids playing around it, because sometimes it's in a location where your kids are playing. And most importantly, you don't want to be sleeping next to it or working.
What's the radius?
I did take a Geiger meter to it like a year ago, and it would pick up on about like 10 feet around it. So if your bed is against the wall, I mean, you're talking less than a foot, but I think around 5 feet it starts to go down, and around 10 feet it goes out. Now, speaking of this, this is my next topic, is EMF and Wi-Fi exposure. The thing that really went the highest on the Geiger meter is, guess what it is in the house?
The microwave.
That's a good guess, but no, it wasn't. It was the Wi-Fi. It was the router. And so obviously, like, that's not ideal, right? Because we need Wi-Fi. I'm not saying like don't get on the internet, but what I'm saying is be like conscious of where you're placing it. Is the Wi-Fi? I've heard people putting their box under their bed. Like, that's insane. The best is get it away from where everyone sleeps. And have that. Where is your box? Do you know?
Well, we have Eero. Do you know what that is? So it's like, well, sounds terrible, but it's not in our bedroom, but the Eero is like several hubs so that it's equally as powerful throughout our whole property.
Okay.
So there's not like one router. Yeah, it's spread out. But one's in his office. I have one here in my office, and one's in our living room, and one's in our garage.
Okay. But just not, I think the most important thing is this.
We like turn our phones off at night.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to get to, is the most important, most practical thing you do is is not have it where you're sleeping, or unplug your Wi-Fi. I don't know if you can, I'm sure you can unplug it, but unplug it
can't.
at night. And the reason why is if you could get 7 to 8 to 9 hours of not having a constant emitting device on your system, it allows your body to get into that human resonance, that like natural, like human resonance, and where you're not being bombarded. Because every day, you know, we're on computers, we're on phones, and yeah, you can't help that, but you can at least turn it off while you sleep. One idea I tell patients is to put a timer on it, like a Christmas timer, so that it kind of turns off at midnight. And
we used to have that, but well, particularly for me, I'm so often on call that, and also here there's no phone service. Everything is Wi-Fi calling. And so it's just not an option to not have my phone on. And so like right now I'm off call, so I turn my phone off at night, but if I'm on call, then that is what it is. And I actually have to sleep with it like near me, so I hear it. So that's just been something I accept with the territory.
And there's some situations where you can't, like I have another mom that like the husband's up all night, like doing his thing, and there's no way he's going to want the internet turned off. Like that's fine. But I say a majority of the people aren't on call with patients.
Totally, of course.
Or and you can easily just set your Wi-Fi off. And I say from like midnight to 5 a.m. when you know no one's on it. That's like at least gives you 5 minutes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't have that, then you look at other exposures, which is like a cell phone, you know, like, and I think most people have heard this, but like talk on speakerphone if you can. If you're gonna use headsets, like I know they're trendy, but the pods are the worst thing ever. It's just like Bluetooth in your ears. Like do a hard wire from your phone to use the hard wire. Don't put your phone on your body at anywhere. Always keep it off you. So don't put it in your pockets, especially if you're trying to get pregnant. Or, you know, in your fertile phase of life. And this is important for men too, because it seriously impacts like sperm quality, just sperm shape, everything. So it's a big deal because we can't get away from it. And nor do I want to go back to 1800 where we don't have this technology, because these devices really make our life easy, right? Like you don't have to go to work 9 to 5, and we have so much benefit from these, you know, we can work from our phones, but we just have to use them consciously.
I'm texting my husband as we're
Do we have a smart meter?
He just texted me, are we doing an EMF cleanse? Because I'm just sending him, I'm like, we have to switch from smart meter to digital. We have to start sleeping with our phones out of our room. You have to stop using the earbuds. Your phone can't be in your pocket ever again.
Especially if you're trying to have another baby. Maybe it's like after you guys are done having babies, it's like, all right, you can get prostate cancer if you want.
I never put my phone in my pocket. I would never use earbuds.
But a lot of people do, and they don't know, you know? And so I think it's just using it consciously. It's like, for instance, this is real practical thing. I had a patient for a long time, healthy. All of a sudden she ran labs. TSH was through the roof. And her thyroid is like, whoa, what happened? Like, you're doing everything right. Usually if I have thyroid cases, like there's a lot to fix. So I started asking about her, like, does she have a smart meter? And so she was doing everything wrong. She was using the pod. She had an Apple Watch. She keeps her cell phone like on her body. And like, even like she would do an Apple Watch. And I was like, well, why are you exercising with an Apple Watch? And she would be like, because it directions. I need, and I was like, well, you need directions the first time you go on a new walk, but after that, you don't need directions anymore. Right. So we started really like tearing apart.
People just love that shit.
What?
People just love that shit.
They love the technology. But then also, so here's what happened. She got rid of all that stuff. I gave her some stuff to kind of like promote her body to heal, and her thyroid fell into complete range. And I know that if I had just given her medicine but didn't address these issues, then it wouldn't have been as effective. But the EMF particularly is really sensitive to the thyroid. Think about this. This is our only organ that's not in our, like, protected by our internal organs. So it's like our organ is like just floating around in space. So it's constantly being bombarded. We wonder why, Synthroid is thyroid medication. It's the #1 prescribed medication in the United States. So thyroid issues are a really big deal. And we know there's been, if you do a Google search on thyroid, thyroid disease or cancer and EMF, I mean, you're going to get tons and tons of information. So this information's out there. We just have to make it like more practical for people. So like you said, just don't touch it. Don't wear the pods. Yeah. Johnny's still wearing pods.
He wasn't. And I bought him like
The wire.
Like Dr. Mercola has some that are like whatever. Yeah, the wire. And then he went back to it recently because when he's cooking, he listens to something usually, and is like moving all around.
Yeah. I mean, same too. We have a speaker that we do. Same thing. My husband was like using the Bluetooth, from the phone on the speaker, and it would be on the speaker. So it wasn't like if a Bluetooth device, like say you're like, you have a device, you have your phone and you have your pods and it's a Bluetooth connection. So like anything in between it is that signal's going to. So if your phone is like on the speaker and it's not really the signal isn't really going out, well, that's fine. But I still got onto my husband. I'm like, use the aux cord. Hello.
Right.
And so like we have a portable speaker that if we're cooking or something, a Bose speaker, I just use an aux cord and plug in. I had to buy, the new cell phones, they don't have the adapters are different. So I had to buy the lightning adapter so I could use the aux. They make it really hard to like be healthy, but you just have to know like what to do. So that's another solution for Johnny, is just to have the speaker near him when he's cooking.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm thinking we have like full surround, like house surround sound Sonos that works off of Bluetooth on our phones.
And that might be like, so make a list, maybe not you, but make a list for people listening of like what you can't change, but what you can, because you'll find that there is a lot that you can change for the stuff that you can't. But the smart meter thing, I think, is one of the most important things. So look into that if you do, and request for them to put a digital meter back on.
Thankfully, mine's in my garage.
Yes,
so
that's a great place
far.
to put them. If you're building a house, put it on the garage. Unless people turn their, garages into like living rooms and gyms and stuff. But I love the old houses where they used to have the electrical boxes like at the start of the driveway. I love that concept. Like far away, but I love Teslas, and I love the idea of like some of those cars, but I rode in one time and I like felt like I felt like I was getting zapped. Like you're riding on one of the biggest Wi-Fi like machines there is, right? And it's like the whole car. So
creepy.
Yeah, it can be creepy. I rode in one time and I felt like I was being bombarded, and I was like, I don't really like this feeling. So I couldn't imagine being in one on a road trip or anything. But okay, next topic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think we'll finish this with, we kind of summarizing like the solutions really is just to be as natural as possible, eat clean food, drink clean water, surround yourself in air, natural air, clean air. Don't have too much EMF, like bombarding your system all the time. But the last one obviously is to use alternative medicine. And I'm going to say when possible, but I have yet to find a time when I've like needed to reach out to allopathic medicine, because when you know what you're doing, you don't have to treat a lot of things that, you always hear the excuse, oh, I love homeopathy, but sometimes I need a little allopathic medicine. And I would say that sometimes is like pretty narrow. Usually the only time I refer a patient out is orthopedics. Like if a kid, I had a case the other day where the kid fell down some stairs. And yes, we got homeopathy on board right away, but the kid, it wasn't relieving it like I should. And I knew something was wrong. I know he's 1 year old. He's so cute. And he ended up breaking like his tibia, I think. And so he's in like a little cast, but I had to tell the mom didn't like allopathic medicine. I'm like, look, this is why we love like orthopedic surgeons. They don't care about vaccines. They don't care about anything like that. They just want you, especially in a young kid, they just want to make sure that you don't want to, growth is so important, and like development. And if you leave an injury like that's like a broken bone that's not put back into place, that could have serious repercussions for the rest of your life. And so that excuse aside, like use alternative medicine as your lifestyle, meaning, and a good segue into this is like, what is an alternative to vaccines? Well, the real answer is don't get any, right? And be healthy and create an environment where you're not susceptible to getting disease, right? Like we talked about this like terrain type of theory where you keep your microbiome and your terrain is so healthy that you can be in a room with everyone who has a cough and not get the cough yourself because your vitality is so high you didn't get it.
If you believe coughs are contagious.
Right.
Which I do not.
Right. Well, this is like, Yes, that is true. And when you have that thought, homeoprophylaxis isn't for you, right? Because then you don't believe in the contagion theory. But homeoprophylaxis it's a middle ground between no vaccines and vaccines, okay? And if you ask what I do personally, I don't do vaccines because I just believe in being healthy. But I have had patients where it's a middle road. Maybe they're too scared to not vaccinate, but they don't want to vaccinate. Or sometimes I've even had it where the husband really wants them to vaccinate and they don't, and the husband agrees to homeopathic prophylaxis.
So you're saying it's the home birth with a medical midwife.
Yes. And like I said, I don't choose that option. I don't actually use homeopathic prophylaxis on my kids. Maybe there would be a situation where I would, let's say, if legitly Ebola was going around, maybe I would use homeopathic prophylaxis there because that's like a really nasty disease. But that's a pretty obscure like kind of thought. So, but yes, it is essentially it is it. But in a way it's not too, because what homeopathic prophylaxis is it's just like vaccines where you take the information from the bug and you put it in a minute dose to give your body like the blueprint, the memory, and then the vaccines like the antibodies. But in homeopathic prophylaxis, it's more of like a blueprint that you give the body the information so that it has the information to like make the antibodies, so that if you come in contact with the disease, you won't get it because that information's already there. And what's nice about homeopathy is there's no other added ingredients like aluminum and stuff and kidney cells and toxic ingredients. So you're giving your body the information, but you're not injecting them with a bunch of poisons. And so, but there was a study done. It's really hard to get studies done on prophylaxis because I mean, we're dealing with like vaccines and big pharma here, but there was a study done in Cuba where, I'm sorry, like, let me go back to the Spanish flu of 1918, where like there was like something like a crazy, like a 50% mortality rate, right? So it'd be fun to break apart that with a terrain theory. I'm not the person to do that, but that would be interesting. And what they found was there's a 50% mortality rate, but the people that took the homeopathic genus epidemicus, the remedy that matched those symptoms at that time, had a 90% protection rate. So the people that didn't had a 50% protection rate, where 50% of them died. So there's one in Cuba with leprosy. There's enough of them out there, enough of these like studies that are in homeopathic literature where the group that got the homeopathic prophylaxis did not get the disease. So it's just a good option that people need to be aware is out there. And
I guess the thing I feel confused on is, but all these uninjected kids aren't getting these diseases either.
Right.
So
but I mean, I do have unvaccinated kids get whooping cough. I mean, like really bad coughs go around, or pneumococcal, or stuff that they
totally. I meant
and,
like, I didn't, yeah, let me choose my words more carefully. Of course, there will be cases, but I mean on some sort of mass scale.
yeah, no, I mean, the theory is vaccines took away mumps and measles and all this, but it landed us with a big chronic disease epidemic from the vaccines themselves. I don't necessarily think vaccines took away those illnesses. Like if you look at polio, that's the argument everyone or always makes with polio. But the time when they started really cleaning up sanitation and stuff is obvious that it was already on a decline. And the vaccines got introduced, that it was like already like mostly done. So everyone will say, well, it cured polio, but it really didn't. Really sanitation and that stuff did. But like, let me see of a case when, like let me give you an example where I might use it. If I was going on a trip to Hawaii and I know whooping cough is going around and I really didn't want my kids to get sick, maybe I would dose them with a whooping cough no-sode. Why not, right? It would make, if I don't want them to get sick.
So you believe in contagion? That's what that means, what you just said, right?
That is what that means. I think that this is such a hot topic, and I'm honestly not the person to discuss terrain theory versus contagion because
we can cut it out. I'm just curious.
No, I don't want to cut it out.
Because I mean, the language you use does say that you believe that, Like that your son could show up in Hawaii and breathe in whooping cough and then get it, right? That's contagion.
Right, right, right.
But like another part of you doesn't believe that.
Right, right, right.
Because I
Well,
know
and I
you.
guess it's not so much what I believe, right? Because I probably would not, I wouldn't dose my kid with whooping cough if
But you
what
just
I would
said,
do, what?
you
That's what
just said
I'm
that
like,
you would.
well, no, okay, so when I'm talking about like patience, because like the thing is like,
Well, I get that you're helping people moderate their own fear and their own,
yes,
I understand that. But
yeah,
what about you? Because you
I
practice
think,
what you believe, right?
right. So, well, I'm pretty hardcore. Well, listen, Emily, I'm pretty hardcore. And what I've learned is that most people aren't as hardcore as I am. So, what I
Okay.
would do probably isn't what most of my patients would do. And I
Mhm.
used to kind of have this attitude, well, they should do that. Like, that's what it should be. But
So is the homeopathy prophylaxis just a ruse then to just satiate their little fear brains? Ultimately? Yes.
I don't think so, because if I have a patient where they aren't living the healthiest lifestyle, well, then is their susceptibility so low that they can get the disease? Yes. I
But what do
mean,
you mean get?
huh?
What do you mean get?
I mean, you put your kid in school and they come down with a cough because other kids have the cough,
But
right?
I mean, I don't see it that way at all. So I'm just kind of exploring
Yeah.
your if that's what you think. Yeah.
Well,
I don't think there a cough is some like little naughty germ floating around that then you like inhale and then it lives inside of you and now you have it.
yeah.
That's
No,
not
I
why
mean,
kids get sick.
yeah. I guess in a way, I don't fully subscribe to terrain, but I do like I'm kind of I don't think about this a lot, honestly, because let me just say how I see it instead of trying to prove myself to fit in a box of the terrain versus
Yeah,
contagion
yeah.
theory. Let me see how I see it is that when your susceptibility is high, meaning you don't take care of yourself and your immunity is low and you eat a toxic diet and you eat processed foods,
And you're
our
vulnerable.
you're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I see.
But vulnerable to what? To
Well,
your own self-expression of toxification, right? Like to your own, or is it to catching? Like to your
it's their
own,
own, because ultimately when kids get sick, there's like usually like a stressor that happens, right? So it's
of
almost a
course.
breakdown inside instead of like you're catching something. And that's where I side more with the terrain. It's an internal breakdown of why your body gets the disease versus being like it's like catching something, right?
But then how would you go to school and get a
Well,
cough?
if you eat a really bad diet and you have a really stressful life, like your kid is in stress because the parents are always arguing or something, those kids are going to go to school and get the cough.
But
So
it has
it's
nothing to do with school.
right. Oh, well, I'm just saying, like at the park, anywhere where there's tons, like let's say it's cold and see,
But
here's
that's my point is that school gets blamed, other kids get blamed, the park gets blamed, and no one's actually looking at the shitty parents who are emotionally neglecting their kid.
right. Yeah,
That's what the cough's
it's
expressing.
interesting. I mean, yeah, it's super interesting. For instance, I know like my son doesn't get sick that often, but the last 3 or 4 times he got sick, it wasn't because he went to the park and got sick, like and coughed on someone. There's been plenty of times where kids have like coughed on him
Exactly.
and he doesn't get sick, right? But when he does get sick, it's when he is more emotional, or maybe he has an anger outburst or something, and maybe something is going around, and because his immune system is so down from the stress or something that he is more susceptible to something because if the
But you're
cough
still saying something going around, so that's still
right,
a
because would
contagion.
he have gotten a cough if he hadn't been coughed on, right? He could, like, my son, he could have a behavior outburst like once a week. He doesn't get sick once a week, right? But if there is something going around and he is having a bad day, I mean, he eats pretty good, so that's never an issue. But if and some emotions happen, and then it's like, whoa, he just got a cough. Where did this come from, right? it's never like he gets a cough by himself. It's always
Yeah. I guess I like, it doesn't ever occur to me to wonder where it came from. It's like it is only the body expressing itself. Like it, and I'm certainly not an expert on any of the GNM stuff, but my very peripheral understanding is that the body around another body expressing similar symptoms can be in resonance with the energetic body, or whatever the right term is, of learning how to shed or learning how to detoxify, and be in resonance with that, and like, oh, like I'm going to try that too. This is
yeah.
reductive. Obviously, I'm going to totally butcher this explanation. um
But
but
in the
just like when a kid gets a fever, it's like they didn't catch a fever. We know that a fever
Mhm.
is a healing, process for the
But
body
one thing I don't
system.
understand about terrain people, and I get this, it's the energy, like there's something in the field, the resonance that you like. We can't deny that when you have multiple kids at home, it's sometimes, or like a family, and an illness will go through the kids, right? And is
Yeah,
it like
but unless it's going through everyone, then it doesn't stand.
right?
Because
But a
how
lot
could
of
it be
but
that like
sometimes
two of us get sick and not all four of us?
well, this is why I kind of don't really talk about terrain versus, contagion. And I just say talk about vitality and susceptibility to disease,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't really make sense to me either that you can have two kids and they're in resonance with each other, so they both get the fever. Like, how does that? Like, how does?
But I know with my kids and other kids I've been close to, it's never identical cases. Like
Mm,
they will, and you know that obviously because you
yeah,
work so much with kids. There's always unique expressions of symptoms, right? Like
yeah,
even this is a dumb example, but when Johnny and I went through the like keto flu, like we had different expressions of what our bodies were kind of going through the same process. We were moving into ketosis and moving, and we were detoxifying, but it wasn't identical because we're
yeah.
two different people.
No, you can
And
have two kids with like they sleep in the same room and they'll get different remedies because their cough is like completely different.
well, that's my point.
Well, I guess I kind of when the terrain theory really, you really like I got really behind that, but then I really couldn't answer. And to me, just they're in resonance with each other is why when an illness comes in a family, it can go through the whole family or it can go through two or three of them. Like, and I couldn't really say, well, this kid was in resonance with it, or and I couldn't really like that didn't really resonate either.
There was a situation a couple years ago at MRF where a child, uh kind of in our extended staff crew, a child had the expressions of what seemed like hand, foot, mouth. And there was one family here who was really scared of getting it. And they talked a lot about it and they avoided anyone who had seen them.
Oh
They
my
were
God.
really scared. And of like 12 families that were all, I'll use the word exposed here for this story. I don't believe in that, but they were all around the hand, foot, mouth kid. The only family that replicated those same symptoms was the scared family.
Yeah,
And
the fear is for
I
real.
thought that was like very interesting
Well,
because
you're
it didn't
attracting what you're
even
putting.
cross my, like, I went to dinner with them, I held the kid, like, I just don't, it doesn't occur to me that it could, like, if there's like the other day, okay, I'm just skipping around, but the other day I ran into this dog on the adjoining land to my land who has a giant tumor on its head. It's super gross, and the tumor's like open. It's so gnarly, and it's like bloody and open. It's so disgusting. And so the dog came near me to like check me out in my golf cart, and I saw it, and my natural reaction was to recoil, and
Mhm.
like under no circumstances, like my animal body is like, under no circumstances should I let that touch me. Not because I think I'm gonna catch something, but because it's fucking gross, you
Mhm.
know? And so like if I saw a child or a human of any age with like open sores all over their body, unless it was my own children, of course, I'd be like, yeah, I'm good. Like if their mom has it, they have it. But it's
Yeah.
it's not a yeah, I've really just unpacked this since COVID, and like I don't have the best
The
words
fear
for
is
it, but
real, and what
the
you put
fear is
your
real and I
what
don't
you
have
put your
it.
mind to, you can manifest it. Like that's
Of
for real.
course. But
And so
that's the resonance. That's the point. Is
Mhm.
resonance is and again, like I know people could do this more justice than me, but
Yeah, same.
it's no it's not lost on me that the one family who was openly afraid was the one family that had those symptoms and went through that process. Though they all had different, they got it on different places of their body, they still had unique expressions of it. um anyway, it's
Yeah,
all
no,
very interesting.
it's a really interesting it's a conversation that you could just talk about forever, because I treated a ton of COVID patients, right? Like they did have a cough, whether they had COVID, I don't know. I didn't test them. But I had no
Nor would a test mean shit, Jen.
yeah, well, I
Come
mean,
on.
obviously. Trust me, most of my patients didn't get tested just because we are in line. But yeah, the tests are like mostly false positives. But like I don't ever worry I'm gonna get sick, or if someone coughs on me, like I don't worry about that either, you know. But there is a I guess I had one time someone, we were talking about this, and they're like, well, how do you explain it when it goes through the family? But what if like you're not fearful, but you catch it, you get the cold anyway, you get the cough
But you don't get the cold. Your body has decided for its own intelligent reasons that it is time to move through a healing process. You
mm-hmm.
don't get a cold. Like you don't catch that. I mean,
Right,
I
the
know
term
people.
catch, but you do get
You
sick.
do
Like
have
you get
something.
you
Yes, it
get
is
like
your unique expression. Why is it happening at the exact same time? Well, actually, a lot of times it happens afterwards. There's also all of it happens. You know,
Mhm,
like if we were to look at, and you obviously are a good resource for this, if you were to look at several families over the course of several years, I'll just speak for mine specifically. We've never all gone down at the same time. Like, one of the kids will express something, and then after like 2 days the other kid will express something, and
mhm,
then I might feel a little funky for a couple days, and then Johnny usually is the last one, and he'll bring
mhm,
up the end, or the opposite. He'll go through something first, and then I will, and then one of our kids will, and maybe the other kid doesn't. And
mhm,
to me, that does not mean we're passing something to each other. It's more like we are in a living organism, as like a group of trees, that share roots. Like our energetic fields are so intertwined with each other that perhaps um we are giving each other's energetic bodies like permission and showing each other how to move through healing
mhm.
processes, because it's also, we would have to totally reframe that having these symptoms isn't bad,
Yeah.
right? Like all of that. Like it's not even really correct to use terms like being sick,
Yeah.
like that doesn't
Well, and then
really
you can
make
argue that
sense.
you really don't want to treat this, right? Because your body's naturally cleansing itself,
Well,
and
I think then you get into the weeds around what does it mean to treat.
yeah.
And of course, like supporting something is different than suppressing something, right? So with how you support my family, we use the word treat, but
Yeah.
it's not ibuprofen. It's not, Tylenol. You're not suppressing. Right. So I mean, to support something to move through your body isn't, I mean, it's magical in a way, but it's also not like a band-aid. It's a
Mhm.
totally different consciousness to go, how can I
Mhm.
support this to happen, with also with herbs and other stuff.
Mhm.
But it is
Mhm.
a real consciousness shift. And what I'm hearing and what you're saying, and maybe admittedly a bit of your confusion around it, is that you have your own sense of truth and how you run things in your family, but you also work with a population who's still very committed to contagion theory, and so you're like trying to straddle that and figure that out.
Yeah, and I would say that I don't really figure that I don't know if I figure that out. It's just that, I see where people are, and it's like in the end of the day, what do the parents want? They just want their kid to get better, right? They just want their cough to get better and stuff. And so we really just focus on getting the cough better. I don't talk to the parent about, well, this isn't I'll have parents say like, oh, it's going through the family. And I don't really go into like, well, it's not we don't believe in contagion, right? I just don't go into that anymore. Maybe I should, but I think I do see most of my patients are more conscious and aware and actually like will ask about this stuff, but at the same time, they're hiring me because their daughter has a bad cough and they want me to take their homeopathic case and find a remedy and get their cough gone, you know?
Well, they're replacing you with an allopathic doctor
Yeah,
in their
exactly.
minds, you know,
Mhm.
whereas you're actually, you know, have a much wider lens and are actually from quite a different consciousness paradigm, but you're still serving people in that paradigm,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yeah, we might need to maybe my husband should come on and really dice out the terrain theory versus the contagion.
Where does he land on all that?
Um, he's just better at like talking about those types of issues, you know, like
But
I'm
does he
like,
think you like catch the boogeyman out
no,
there?
no, no, we don't think you catch anything like as a that's not something that we think of either, but the vitality of the system is important and um it's I'd have to ask him. You'd have to ask him honestly where he is at that because it is like we've talked about it a lot, and it is easy in theory to stand behind one of the concepts, right? But then when you
But I don't think it's against the vitality piece. Like I think let's use the word illness or sickness. Like
Mhm.
with someone who is super healthy and vital, navigating what would then be very rare depletions of the system or, you know, like hits like immune system depletion feels like what's the right word? Like just an expression of being alive in the body, just like moving through stuff. Whereas you have like chronically ill people, you have people who get sick all the time, people who, you know, have constant whatever. Yeah, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of issues. And so those are like two pretty different animals, right?
So
Because
in homeopathy, they will the old school homeopaths will say that an acute illness is actually a cleansing effect of
sure.
the body. And so that's actually like why like that would be like more like you when we fall ill, it's a chance for our body to basically purge the toxins from the system. And actually in really chronically sick people, you'll hear this a lot is they say, I haven't gotten sick in so long, right? They haven't gotten a cold or a fever or like anything. And a lot of adults don't get fevers, but, and it's like, and so you're too sick to mount an immune response
Wow.
to actually cleanse yourself. Like
Mm-hmm.
the innate homeopath, like we don't see acute illness as a bad thing. We see it as a
Right.
cleansing effect. And in the end, you're going to get like an upgrade in your immune system, you know? It's all very interesting. It's a really interesting topic. And this is just like an acute type of case we're talking about. But I would say going back to just like your preferred medicine is using like obviously herbal medicine supplementation can be handy if you're devoid of some nutrients, but really like homeopathy is when you're talking about living in a new paradigm, like when you look at the medicine of that paradigm, homeopathy really becomes like the main medicine that you'll use. Like if you do have a cough or if you're struggling with thyroid issues or you have gut issues, like homeopathy can really help. And there was a study done, in India, all the studies on homeopathy are done in India because it's just they embrace the medicine so well. But they actually did a study on they did a 24-month study on conventional kids and kids that were raised with homeopathy, and this is for any ailment that was that comes up in the first 2 years. And the conclusion is the homeopathic children were healthier, like just because they weren't being suppressed. They and so homeopathy doesn't suppress it. Basically you match the symptoms of let's say you have a cough, or you match the exact symptoms of that cough to a remedy that when it was that basically was proved that in dilute forms it will cure those symptoms, and that in crude forms it will cause those symptoms. And so homeopathy, it has a lot of with kids that are raised using homeopathic medicine tend to be healthier, like period. And homeopathy is one of the most controversial medicines out there. Like people hate homeopathy, who hate homeopathy. And it's really it's a pretty big concept to wrap your mind around, because these substances in these vials, Avogadro's number is 10 to the negative 23. So you have like a decimal point and then you have 23 zeros ahead of it. that is, so if anything over Avogadro's number is considered there's substance in it, right? Well, these homeopathic remedies are way beyond Avogadro's number. And so into like the scientific mind, there's like nothing in that. But we know that it does something. We know that if you have symptoms and you can match the remedy correctly, that it's like poof, your symptoms go away. And you've had experience with that, and I've definitely like seen that a ton. It is a pretty profound system of medicine that I think.
Do you think it's possible that it's simply because the mind believes it?
No. I've seen personally, I've just seen too many cases where you get the remedy right and symptoms are gone within minutes. But like, okay, so let's take a case. I can take it. Let me think of a case where like I had an allergy case the other week, right? And the person believes in homeopathy like fully, right? That's why they call me. But we tried 2 or 3 remedies before that. And if it was just a placebo effect, those remedies could have worked. But it wasn't until I got the correct remedy on remedy 3 or 4 as soon as I got the correct remedy, within an hour, their symptoms are like, they're just overall feeling better. And then within a day, like all their symptoms are gone, and they've been struggling with this for like 3 or 4 weeks. Like, you can't really contribute that to placebo. Sometimes you can, and I think placebo can be powerful. They've done like plenty of studies on placebo where you give someone anything you give, will help them because they're getting attention and whatnot. But there's been too many times where I've given a remedy, and this is why I like my patients to have a kit, because oftentimes maybe I'm off the mark, or sometimes the patient didn't give me enough information. They weren't observant enough to give me the right case, right? So we start with a couple remedies, and if it was a placebo effect, they would have reacted to the first remedies, but it's not until I get the actual remedy. And sometimes it's been like 5 or 6 down the line. And as soon as I can get the right symptom and the right remedy, that it like goes away quickly. So I just don't think it's placebo effect. I've just seen too many cases. But when you're the take home message with homeopathy is when you're looking to be healthy and to thrive in this world, like looking to alternative medicine to treat your symptoms and ailments, and also to just like boost your system, like with herbs and just immune, just like reishi and tonic herbs, just to increase the vitality of the system, is to use alternative medicine. And when you have a specific symptom that you need to cure, that's when you'll look to homeopathy.
Yeah, I think so much of this is changing your perspective, right? Because the willingness to like actually be with your body, be with your symptoms, which I'm not pretending I do that all the time. Sometimes I'm like, give me that ibuprofen. I am not willing to.
I've had patients that are like super conscious, and they're like, I've looked up German new medicine. This isn't it. Like, can you just give me a remedy, And so it's like, you want to try, and you want to have this ideal that you can just cure it just by sitting there and like being in that resonance. And sometimes you just need a little bit more. And I guess when you do need a little bit more, you should know who to call, right? That's like,
I don't know if you need it. Everything is just a choice. It's all a buffet of your own consciousness, and get to choose if you're willing to sit in it and if you're not, I mean, what I'm pointing out is, when I take ibuprofen, I am consciously choosing cognitive dissonance, really. I'm consciously choosing to suppress, ignore, not get the messages and learning that's here, for me. Yeah.
And I've also, to be fair, like I've also seen people that are like way into getting the message, right? And it's like they suffer so much trying to get the message and to be cured. And that's also like, well, why wouldn't you just get a homeopath on board to take your case and to get cured? Because like, you're telling me you're waiting for the message, and it's like been 6 months and you're still really sick, And so
yeah, but that might be, I mean, I've also seen that be the thing that
that's what they need. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So I'll leave it with this. His name's George Vasulkis. He's one of the best. He's actually still living, one of the best homeopaths in the world. And he'll say that if you hear the word homeopathy, you're lucky. because it's basically what his point is you don't choose homeopathy chooses you. And most of the people, they hear about it, they have a huge issue with it, or it just goes in one ear and out the other, right? And if you've ever shared homeopathy with someone, you know what that means. They just like, yeah, whatever. But if you have clutched onto it and it resonates with you, then it's chosen you. And I think that's really cool. So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's how I feel about ayahuasca.
Yeah, same.
You know, probably a lot of stuff is like that. That's powerful medicine.
Yeah.
Well, I love you.
Same. Love you too.
Love you in my life and all that you bring. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to share some of your wisdom.
Yeah, definitely. Always great.
I hope you enjoyed the show today. You can support this podcast by donating to it through the link in the show notes below. And of course, leaving an awesome review on whatever platform you listen on. The more reviews, the more visibility the show gets. So let's spread the good word of sovereign birth. Don't forget, you can watch our podcast interviews on YouTube and see the women as they tell their birth and power stories. And you'll also find our viral free birth collection of epic raw birth videos on our YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We've always got a lot going on at Free Birth Society, and you can find out all about it at freebirthsociety.com, at Free Birth Society on Instagram, and opt in to my newsletter below. We offer courses on free birth, authentic midwifery, the blood mysteries, as well as one-on-one coaching, in-person retreats, and of course our annual women's gathering, the Matriarch Rising Festival. Our exclusive, private, vetted membership, The Lighthouse, is definitely something to check out if you're looking for a community of wise sisters to get guidance from and to meet in real life. Together we rise, sisters. We must speak our stories, fully claim our lives, and support one another. This is the living revolution, and I am so grateful to be in it with all of you. I'll leave you with our gorgeous Free Birth Society theme song, Wild Woman by Aruba Red. I honor you for the wisdom you held, the ancient traditions of plant medicine and womb magic. I feel the spirit of the ancestors as I place my hands upon my belly. This sacred portal will be honored. Eons upon light beams of survival, withstanding the eradication of our power by design. I will not allow the separation of our young to be forced upon me. My sisters will no longer birth in captivity. The picket line redefined from burning our wild women to paralyzing us and drugging our babes. Strapped down in a clinical white bed, drying up the milk from our breasts. Keep your needles. My family will never again be doomed to chase those dragons or your poison. We reject your fear. We choose love. Everything with intention. Death, ascension. I will fly and bring her back.